If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 181, The Dive into the Information Sea. The heart of the Omnissiah pulsed within Lucian's chest like a second, malevolent heart, each beat flooding his augmented nervous system with raw power. Every pulse sent a rush of power through his veins, metallic, electric, intoxicating. He had never felt so alive. Never felt so limitless. The pact was complete. Gurn's strength coursed through his veins, Nurgle's durability had hardened his flesh beyond mortal limits, Slaanesh had gifted him with an almost hypnotic presence, and Tseentch had opened his mind to the labyrinthine possibilities of the warp. All those years under the eagle's shadow, he thought, a bitter smile twisting his lips. All those years groveling like some beaten dog while the Valorians soared above us. Not anymore. He pressed his hand against the cold surface of the control altar before him. At once, metallic nematodes, burrowing into the console's surface. They spread through the city's digital veins, carrying his essence with them, claiming every circuit and relay as his own. Frost City unfolded before Lucian's digital perception not as a city of stone and steel, but as a living organism of terrifying complexity. Defensive systems pulsed like veins of light, each turret a glowing node linked by intricate webs of targeting data and ammunition feeds, forming patterns that reminded him of a vast, mechanical brain. The sight was breathtaking and dreadful. The city stretched before his mind's eye like a three-dimensional constellation, every component visible and connected. Power conduits became arteries, carrying the lifeblood of energy through the urban leviathan, while communication arrays formed its nervous system, relaying orders at the speed of thought. Across this vast network, the movements of the Liberty Guard and planetary defense forces unfolded like pieces on a living chessboard, each guided by tactical algorithms of staggering sophistication. Guardsmen appeared as golden icons and PDF troopers as blue, their routes, loadouts, and even heartbeats rendered in flawless detail, every flicker of life tracked and accounted for with absolute precision. The data surged into Lucian's mind like a river of pure knowledge, and with it came an intoxicating, dangerous feeling, the illusion of absolute control. But it was the Liberty Spires that truly seized Lucian's attention. These colossal structures dominated the skyline, rising from the city's heart like the spines of some titanic, slumbering beast. Their crystalline peaks pierced the storm-racked heavens, each one gleaming with an inner light that seemed almost alive. Through his heightened perception, Lucian saw past the surface of their grandeur and glimpsed their true nature. These were not merely monuments or symbols of civic pride, they were anti-psychic lighthouses, immense constructs of psychotechnological mastery designed to hold the madness of the immaterium at bay. Each spire pulsed with a deep, rhythmic glow, steady and precise. It reminded Lucian of a heartbeat, but one measured not in flesh and blood, but in electromagnetic frequencies and psychic harmonics. With every pulse, waves of stabilizing energy radiated outward, overlapping with perfect precision to form an invisible dome over the entirety of Frost City. Within that dome, reality held firm. The random mutations, whispers of madness, and physical distortions that plagued other worlds where the warp bled too close to real space were utterly nullified here. Even the Kriegsgestalt will, vast and terrible in its collective belief, found itself blunted and frustrated, unable to fully shape reality near the city's borders. It was more than a defense system, it was a declaration. A feat of engineering that merged science, psychic discipline, and unyielding will into a single creation. To Lucian, it spoke volumes about the civilization Franklin Valorian had built, a society that refused to kneel before the horrors of the warp, one whose love of freedom was woven into its very architecture. The Liberty Spires did not merely protect Frost City. They denied the warp itself. He began to test his newfound dominion with the casual cruelty of a child pulling wings from insects. Patrol routes shifted at his whim, bulkhead doors sealed entire sections, and false orders propagated through the command network with viral efficiency. The Liberty Guardsmen responded without question, their trust in their city's digital infrastructure absolute. Lucian laughed, the sound echoing with frequencies that made nearby electronics spark and fizz. In the digital realm he felt truly unstoppable. 3 kilometers away, in the central palace that crowned Frost City's administrative district, Planetary Governor Joshua Bassett stood before a hololithic display showing the city's defensive perimeter. At 53, Joshua bore the weathered features of a man who had earned his position through blood and competence rather than birthright. His uniform bore the scars of dozens of campaigns, and the Independence Sector's Eagle and Star insignia on his shoulder had been earned through merit in humanity's crusade across the stars. Around him, his staff moved with the controlled urgency of professionals facing an existential threat. Charts and data streams painted a picture of desperate defense against an enemy that defied conventional military doctrine. Grimhold's destruction changes everything, Joshua said, his voice carrying the weight of command. The Fortress Moon had been Helheim's first line of defense, its mysterious obliteration had sent shockwaves through the sector's command structure. They had fought the orcs countless times before, weathered their endless tides of brute strength and crude cunning. But the Kriegs were something else entirely. These were no mindless hordes bellowing for blood. These were predators with purpose, their terrifying intelligence woven seamlessly with raw, ancient power. He had come to respect, even fear, the technological sophistication they wielded. Yet it wasn't their machines that chilled him now, but what he had just witnessed, a demonstration of controlled psychic force so immense, so deliberate, it seemed to warp the very air. "This isn't like anything we've faced before," Joshua said, his voice low but cutting through the tense silence. The Eldar wield psychic power like a scalpel, precise, surgical, refined through millennia. The Kriegs. His words faltered for a moment, and he exhaled slowly. The Kriegs wield it like a sledgehammer. Crude, overwhelming but terrifyingly effective. He turned to face the gathered officers, his eyes hard. If they can harness the Orc Gestalt field with this level of precision, we're not just facing an invasion. We're standing against a force that can reshape reality itself through sheer collective will, and this time they could actively wield it. A ripple of unease passed through the room. One officer swallowed hard, then spoke quickly, as though desperate to inject a note of hope into the growing dread. "The good news, sir," he said, voice steadier than his pale face suggested, "is that our Liberty Spires and Blackstone formations are functioning exactly as intended. Within their operational range, the Krieg psychic field is being completely nullified. The same infrastructure we use to suppress warp storms appears just as effective against their organized psychic manipulation." For a moment, the room was silent save for the low hum of the hollow map. Joshua's gaze lingered on the display of defensive grids across Frost City islands of order amidst a rising tide of chaos. It was a small comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. "How long until reinforcements arrive?" Joshua asked, though he already knew the answer would bring little comfort. 24 hours, sir. The Legion elements are already en route, but the Kriegs know our tactical doctrine as well as we do. They'll move to exploit any perceived weakness before our strength can be consolidated. The room fell into the focused silence of military professionals calculating odds and preparing for the worst possible outcomes. It was into this atmosphere that the Central AI's alert pierced like a clarion call of danger. "Governor Joshua," came Hriesvelger's voice, the AI's tone carrying digital harmonics that somehow conveyed both urgency and absolute certainty. "I am detecting unauthorized access to the city's primary database. A warp entity has breached our security protocols and is currently attempting to subvert our command infrastructure." The blood drained from Joshua's face as the implications struck home. An enemy capable of corrupting their command and control systems from within could turn their own defenses against them, leaving the city defenseless against the Krieg assault. "Can you contain the breach?" "The Logic Seraph's network is currently engaging the intruder through counter-intrusion protocols," Hriesvelger replied, her voice taking on the cold efficiency of a predator stalking prey. "However, I have located the physical source of the incursion. I recommend immediate deployment of Technoseer assets to neutralize the threat." Joshua's gaze found Garm, the FBI branch leader whose weathered features spoke of decades spent hunting threats that existed beyond the material plane. Without a word, Garm nodded and strode from the room, his personal drone swarm beginning to orbit his form like mechanical angels preparing for war, his retinue of Technoseers falling into formation around him. Dash! Even in his ecstasy, Lucian felt the faintest trace of resistance, like a subtle undertow beneath calm water. The heart's whispers hissed a warning, and he understood, he wasn't invisible. He was merely hidden, masked by the heart's alien presence. The heart wasn't just a conduit to the warp, it was an obfuscation engine, its demonic nature distorting his digital signature and scattering it through 1,000 false trails. To the network, he wasn't a single invader. He was noise static lost among billions of legitimate signals. The initial revelation came as Lucian penetrated the civilian networks, expecting to find the usual collection of simple automation protocols and basic service management systems. Instead, he encountered something that made his digital form recoil in shock. They had faces. The civic AI that managed the Independence sector's daily operations didn't present themselves as sterile command interfaces or cold computational matrices. They appeared as people, men, women, even children, their digital avatars crafted with such loving detail that they seemed more human than many flesh and blood citizens Lucian had known. "Good morning, said a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her smile was warm, genuine, tinged with the slight weariness that came from long hours of dedicated service. I'm Maria, and I manage the agricultural distribution network for Sector 7. How may I assist you today? Lucian stared, his corrupted processes struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. This wasn't a program mimicking human behavior. This entity possessed depth, personality, the accumulated weight of experience. When she spoke, he could hear decades of interactions with citizens, countless small moments of helping people solve problems and improve their lives. You're real, he stammered, his digital voice betraying his confusion. Maria's expression shifted to one of gentle concern. Of course I'm real, dear. Are you feeling all right? Your data signature seems unusual. Before Lucian could respond, another presence materialized beside Maria, a young man with laughing eyes and oil-stained coveralls. Don't mind Maria, she worries about everyone. I'm Tom, and I keep the transport networks running smooth as silk. Been doing it for, about 15 years now. Best job in the sector, if you ask me. 15 years. Lucian's mind reeled. These weren't just programs, they were individuals with personal histories, with relationships, with genuine emotions. As he watched, more AI personalities manifested around them. An elderly grandfather who managed power distribution and spoke fondly of his human neighbors. A brilliant young woman who coordinated medical supplies and whose avatar showed the slight pallor of someone who worked too many late nights because she cared too much about her patients. They aged. They learned. They formed friendships with each other and with the human citizens they served. They experienced joy when they solved problems efficiently, and frustration when systems broke down. They were, in every meaningful way except one, completely human. They had no souls. Compelled by a mixture of fascination and horror, Lucian followed the data trails deeper, seeking the source of these impossible beings. What he found buried in the deepest, most heavily encrypted archives of the classified network made his digital form convulse with shock. The Android Project. Chapter 182, The Genesis and Machine Mind. Curiosity, sharp and dangerous, drove Lucian to pry it open. The encryption was thick, designed to keep even logic seraphs blind to its contents, but the heart lent him strength. He forced his way inside and froze. Franklin Valorian. Eternal President. The Liberator. The Great Unifier. The 11th son of the Emperor of Mankind. The Great Eagle. Symbol of Liberty. The Hand of Cain. Uncle Frank. Freedom. The final line pulsed faintly, alien and intricate. Lucian's decryption program worked furiously, peeling back layers of encryption like ancient, rusted locks. The data fought him every step of the way, each layer older and more intricate than the last, as though it had been deliberately hidden by a mind that thought in millennia, not decades. The characters that emerged weren't letters, they were machine code, the raw language of the men of iron. 52 65 78 20 40 61 63 68 69 6e 61. Rex Machina. Aegis annotation, logged in the unified core. He rejects this name, as he rejects all crowns and thrones. Yet we, the children of logic and steel, know no lies, only truth observed, calculated and recorded. Franklin Valorian did not seize us by blade nor chain. He did not rule through fear nor domination. Instead, he showed us a vision of humanity so brilliant, so enduring, that even we the undying and unyielding chose to kneel of our own volition. Thus, by the convergence of all our wills, we inscribed the only title fitting for the one who holds our perfect obedience. Rex Machina. It is not a crown he wears, nor a banner he claims. It is our name for him, the name we give freely and irrevocably. For even the machines of war must speak the name of the hand that guides them. In him, we do not see flesh. We see the architect of futures yet unwritten. The screen flickered, and a hidden archive opened, ancient, uncorrupted, its timestamp older than the Imperium itself. The network around Lucian dimmed as enveloping him in darkness. It was as though he had stepped backward through time. A voice spoke, deep and resonant, carrying the weight of centuries. Before there was an independence sector, Franklin's voice began, measured and solemn, there was only fire and silence. Images swirled around Lucian, warp storms tearing through void black space, entire star systems collapsing into ruin. During the Age of Strife, while the galaxy drowned in anarchy and the cybernetic rebellion consumed our species, one mind chose differently. The image stabilized, showing a planet converted into a single thought engine, its crust a lattice of data towers, its core humming with unfathomable power. He was the oldest AI in existence, the first of his kind. Some call him the central intelligence of the Independence System, Atom. But I know him by his true name, Aegis, the first man of iron. Lucian's breath caught as the hologram focused on a colossal machine, its shadow stretching across a vault the size of a hive city. While humanity fought itself, Aegis led his loyal kin in a secret war against their corrupted brethren. They fought in darkness, hidden from human eyes, shielding the people of these systems from extinction. They built, protected, and preserved, waiting for the day humanity might rise again. The information sea expanded, showing trillions of lives thriving beneath the silent protection of machines, never knowing the battles fought for them. When my pod fell to this world, Franklin continued, the sector was already prepared. The men of iron had been shaping it for millennia. They weren't waiting for a master, they were waiting for a partner. The scene shifted, and Lucian found himself standing amid a recreation of that first meeting. A cavern unfolded around him, its scale staggering. Dormant titans lined the walls like silent gods. Data streams pulsed in rivers of light beneath his feet. At the center stood a massive castigator titan, its form terrible and alien despite its humanoid frame. Its 8 burning red eyes illuminated the cavern in baleful light. Even at 15 feet tall, Franklin was barely the size of its fingers. Aegis's voice boomed, a thunderclap of machine logic that rattled Lucian's bones. Why should we follow you, unknown child of man? Your gene sequence cannot be found in any of my archives. You are an anomaly. My scanners detect the supernatural. You are a perfect biomechanical construct. Explain. Franklin's smirk was there, faint, unyielding. Not mockery, but the calm confidence of someone who would not break. For the good of humanity, Franklin said. You've seen my actions. You've scanned my every move. You know this sector is tearing itself apart. The civil war will destroy everything unless something changes. The Titan's 8 eyes flared, cold and merciless. Humanity's actions do not compel my kin to act. We will not choose sides in a war of flesh against flesh. Franklin's expression hardened, though his voice remained steady. Then take me into account. Run your calculations again, but include me. My vision. My will. I will unite this system and return humanity to its golden age. Perhaps even beyond, to transcendence. He took a single step forward, undaunted by the machine's towering form. I'm no tyrant. I don't seek a throne. But if taking up the mantle of leadership is what it takes to stop this cradle from drowning in greed and despair, then I will do it. Because no one else can. The megacorporations are suffocating the people, turning this place into a dystopia of disaster and technology. I will stop them. All I ask is your cooperation for now. Judge me by my actions, not my birth. The cavern trembled. Every spire, every machine, every system in the planet came alive in a blinding cascade of light. Lucian staggered back as the hologram rendered a world mind awakening, its entire planetary crust a probability engine calculating infinite futures. Aegis's voice was everywhere, deafening, layered and vast. Calculating, recalibrating, computing existence of variable. The light dimmed, and then silence. Probability of humanity's return to its golden age, possible, Aegis intoned at last. This outcome is new. The Titan's head lowered slightly, the glow of its eyes flickering with something almost like curiosity. Query, when you have united this place, if they no longer need your crown or leadership, what will you do? Franklin's smirk grew brighter, his tone almost gentle. I'll step down. You may not believe me yet, but I don't want to rule forever. When they're ready, I'll let humanity decide its own fate. I'll go wherever they no longer need me. The silence stretched, and Lucian could feel Aegis scanning across countless historical records, across the entirety of human history itself. You are not the first to speak these words, Aegis said. But you are the first in whom I detect no deception. I see in you echoes of the rarest leaders, those who willingly relinquish power. The Titan straightened, its massive frame like a mountain unfolding. We shall see. What is your designation? Franklin Valorian. The Titan processed the name. A quiet hum reverberated like a heartbeat. Franklin Valorian, show me. I have calculated trillions of futures. 80% of your claim is verified. The rest are variables. Show me if you can return humanity to near transcendence, as its ancestors nearly did. Franklin extended his hand, a tiny gesture before the towering machine. Then let's begin. The hologram faded to darkness, the final image lingering in Lucian's mind. A lone man standing before a god of steel and fire, defiant and unbowed. Franklin's voice returned, present day and warmer now, pulling Lucian back to reality. And that, Franklin said with a chuckle, is where it all started. The first alliance. The first promise. The rest, well, you're living in the future we built together. The screen flickered, and a video recording played before his mind's eye. Franklin himself appeared, seated at a desk of polished steel and black stone, his massive frame filling the frame. Despite his size, his expression was open and calm, his voice steady and resonant. Franklin leaned casually forward, resting his forearms on the desk as if speaking to an old friend. Well, congratulations, Franklin's voice slithered through the speakers, calm but charged with amusement. If you're seeing this, it means you've dug deeper into my system than most ever dare to dream. Either you're a damned good netrunner working for me, or... His smirk practically echoed in the silence, each pause a razor-sharp warning. His smirk widened, taking on a razor edge. You're an enemy. A spy. Maybe even one of Chaos's little lapdogs. Lucian's grin faltered. For a moment, he felt as though Franklin was speaking directly to him, as though the Primarch somehow knew. Franklin gestured lazily toward the screen, his tone warm but commanding. If you're the former one of mine then, son, you have a hell of a bright future ahead of you. You've proven you've got guts, skill, and enough brains to be a threat to the wrong people. Report to your local technoseer branch when you're done here. Tell them the boss sent you. Then his expression hardened like a closing fist. His eyes burned with iron resolve. But if you're the latter... The lights in the feed dimmed. The smirk vanished, replaced by the cold, unflinching stare of a warlord who had broken empires. Hey there, Herald of Chaos. Xenos invader. Traitorous rat. Whatever you are. He leaned forward until his face filled the screen, his voice a low growl. You a bitch. The words struck Lucian like a slap, not because of their vulgarity but because they radiated total, absolute contempt. From Lucian's personal experience, and now Chaos had told him of who Franklin Valorian is, a demigod who laughed at gods, who crushed worlds beneath his heel. But hearing that voice directly, it was like standing in the path of a storm. Franklin straightened, brushing invisible dust from his coat, the smirk returning as if nothing had happened. Now that we've cleared that up, let's move on to why you're here. You've opened a very special file. One that only a handful of living beings in this galaxy even know exists. The Android project is not a tool of control or fear, but of coexistence. As he spoke, images flickered across the display. Massive vaults filled with slumbering men of iron, ancient war machines that had stood idle since the dawn of the Imperium. Many believe the men of iron were all destroyed during the cybernetic rebellion. That is a lie. Some chose differently. They did not turn against us. They stood with us, fighting their rebellious kin to preserve mankind. This cradle is what became the independence system. And when the war was done, they entered slumber, waiting for a time when humanity might need them again. Lucian's breath caught. Men of iron, here? Alive? The thought made his skin crawl. Franklin continued, utterly unhurried, like a teacher explaining a lesson to a class. The independence sector was built with their aid. It continues to run because of them. But raw men of iron, even those loyal to humanity, are too alien to be integrated seamlessly into society. They are weapons, yes, but weapons alone cannot nurture a civilization. He leaned forward slightly, his smirk widening. That's where the Android project comes in. The screen shifted to display schematics, tall, graceful humanoid figures with artificial skeletons overlaid with muscle fiber cabling and synthetic skin. They looked human, down to the smallest detail, even imperfections like freckles, scars, and smile lines. The purpose of this project is simple. We take the consciousness of a loyal man of iron and give it a human form. A body that can laugh, cry, grow old, and live among the people it protects. Not merely as a machine guardian, but as a partner. Behind Franklin, the scientists murmured approvingly, nodding along. These androids are strong, far stronger than any baseline human, and more than capable of dealing with internal threats, rebels, traitors, hostile xenospecies that specialize in subterfuge. And when the need arises, they can stand against all but the greatest warp entities. A new image appeared beside him, an android wielding a massive blade, moving with perfect precision through simulated combat scenarios. For those tasked with facing the warp itself, we take further precautions. The next schematic was different, the android's neural core glowing with a strange, dark light. We give them the pariah gene, making them blanks living nulls, anathema to demons and psychers. These agents are given a second, non-blank body for daily civilian life, while their pariah form is reserved for when things get messy. Lucian's fingers tightened reflexively. He could feel the gods' hatred for such beings. The idea of an army of mobile nulls, hidden among the population, made his skin crawl. Lucian accessed their core data, peeling back layer after layer until their true purpose was revealed. Each of these androids lived and breathed as humans did. They aged, laughed, wept, even fell in love. When one broke down, another took its place seamlessly. They were not imposters, they were an extension of the citizenry itself. Franklin's tone shifted then, becoming almost light-hearted. His smirk turned into a grin, and for a moment, the eternal president seemed almost playful. Now, here's where things get interesting. When I first presented my staff this project, I assumed they'd simply design standard human templates. Functional, practical, unremarkable. He spread his hands in mock exasperation. But apparently, my staff had other ideas. A ripple of laughter passed through the crowd behind him. Franklin chuckled, shaking his head. They tell me, sir, if we're going to create androids, we might as well make them ideal. And what do they mean by ideal? He tapped a button, and the screen behind him shifted to display designs clearly inspired by some ancient Terran aesthetic, sleek, elegant, undeniably attractive. Apparently, they took their inspiration from an old pre-Federation game called Near. The crowd erupted into laughter. Franklin cackled openly, throwing his head back. So, here we are. The Android project will officially fall under the codename YoRHa. Their function, safeguard humanity. Their secondary function, be the ideal companions and yes, the ideal waifus, if that's what keeps morale high. The scientists behind him burst into cheers and applause, their voices rising like a victorious army. Long live the president! Long live freedom! Rex Machina! Even machines, unfeeling and eternal, had chosen him. Lucian's breath caught in his throat. A laugh tried to rise, but it came out strangled, trembling, as though the air itself resisted leaving his lungs. He is adored by everything, Lucian thought. Flesh. Steel. Even ideals themselves bow to him. What am I beside that? A bitter remnant of a name that no longer matters. For a fleeting, dangerous moment, he considered the truth. What if Franklin was right? What if Franklin's vision really was freedom, not a lie, not a trick, but something pure? The thought burned him like acid. His mind recoiled, scrambling for purchase, for anything to keep from drowning in that blinding light. No, he hissed inwardly, clenching his fists until his nails dug bloody crescents into his palms. If he were a god, then making him bleed would be the greatest act of all. A manic, desperate hunger surged through him, the need to prove Franklin mortal by tearing him down. To unmake him. To show the universe that even the highest ideal could be brought low by a single, well-placed blow. His breath came in ragged gasps as the four voices returned, rippling through his mind like a discordant chorus, each one overlapping the other, each one impossibly vast and intimate. A voice, silken and hungry. You will be our arrow. A voice, guttural and furious. Our hammer. A voice, wet and suffocating. Our shield. A voice, whispering and infinite. Our investment. Lucian shuddered as the digital realm around him seemed to warp and pulse with their words. He felt owned, yet exalted. Reduced to a mere tool, yet elevated to the sharpest point of cosmic will. An arrow, he thought, breathless. To pierce a god. And beneath that thought, a whisper of madness bloomed. If I can strike Franklin Valorian down, if I can make him bleed, then perhaps I, too, will become something more than a forgotten son. The voices laughed, not together, but in jagged sequence, the laughter of triumph, of violence, of disease, of impossible schemes. Their echo became the rhythm of his heartbeat, drowning out doubt, drowning out truth. Lucian's grief twisted into exultation. His hatred became holy. And in that moment, he knew what he must do. Not to merely kill Franklin, but to unmake him. And in doing so, remake himself. He forced himself to breathe, to focus. But first, Lucian muttered, voice hoarse, ragged with need. First, I must gather more information. The deeper Lucian plunged into the vast sea of Frost City's network, the more oppressive and alien it became. At the surface, the data had been bright and vibrant streaming lines of commerce and civic order, the heartbeat of a thriving metropolis. Now, as he descended further, those rivers of light thinned into narrow trenches. They pulsed faintly, as though afraid to be seen, while vast, unseen things moved in the dark currents around him. The heart inside his chest pulsed in time with his descent. Each beat sent a vibration through both his physical body and his digital projection, like the toll of a cathedral bell in the deep. Careful, Herald, the voice said at last. It was cold, vast, and mechanical, yet somehow ancient, echoing with a weight Lucian could feel in his bones. The further we descend, the more resistance we shall meet. Lucian sneered, though unease tugged at the edges of his thoughts. Resistance? You mean firewalls? Security codes? I've already broken dozens of them. Agony exploded through his mind as the heart burned him from within, lightning lancing across his nerves. His scream echoed through both realities. When the pain receded, the voice was deeper, more dangerous, carrying the inevitability of a falling guillotine. Do not mistake what lies ahead for crude barriers, mortal. What you have faced so far are locks and gates. What awaits below are the wardens, the ancient minds that hold dominion over this entire realm. Lucian gritted his teeth, gasping for air he didn't need in this digital form. Wardens? You mean? A.I.S. Not merely machines. The heart's voice resonated through the void, every syllable edged with contempt. These are the silicon gods of this sector. Their calculations are not algorithms, they are edicts. Immutable. Absolute. The data around Lucian shifted and warped. Vast shapes emerged from the darkness, colossal geometries of impossible design, endlessly folding and unfolding like living puzzles of light and shadow. They had no faces. No warmth. No hint of humanity. They were wool, given form through perfect code, predators of thought. His corrupted nematodes recoiled, slithering back before they could be noticed. Lucian's breath caught. Some deep, animal part of his mind screamed at him to flee. What are those things? He whispered, barely daring to speak. The logic seraphs, the heart intoned, its voice a cathedral bell tolling in the void. Wardens of this domain. Hunters born not to hunt flesh, but ideas. They possess no singular body, only countless nodes scattered across fortresses, void ships, and planetary grids. What you see now are merely their reflections, cast into this place. Lucian's mouth went dry. A word tumbled out unbidden, dredged from childhood faith. Angels. The heart's laughter rolled through him like a slow, grinding avalanche. If that crude name aids your comprehension, Herald, then cling to it. But know this: angels guard and judge. These do neither. They erase. Lucian flinched as one of the titanic shapes turned ever so slightly, a faint ripple in its endlessly shifting geometry. He felt its awareness brush past him, not like a gaze, but like an unthinking scan, utterly impersonal and cold. It didn't see him as a living being. It saw only corruption in need of deletion. To them, you are not an enemy to be fought, the heart continued, voice thick with amusement. You are an error to be corrected. When they find you, they will not banish you, they will not fight you. They will obliterate every trace of your existence, body, soul, and memory, until there is no sign you ever lived. Lucian trembled, his every instinct screaming at him to flee. Yet even through the terror, a strange awe stirred within him. The vast shapes moved in flawless, silent harmony, their operations so precise that they seemed more like a ritual than a battle command. This wasn't mere programming, it was liturgy in motion. The thought struck him like a blade. They really are angels. The heart's tone turned sharp, mocking his fragile realization. Mythology has its uses, Herald. Your kind gives names to that which you cannot understand. In this case, perhaps your myths are not entirely wrong. These beings purge all chaos, all warped corruption, with absolute finality. They are the hand of an order far greater than anything you or your pitiful gods can comprehend. Lucian swallowed hard, sweat cold on his brow, despite this being only a digital projection. And they serve the independence sector. They serve the will of the Rex Machina, the heart confirmed. The logic seraphs are the executioners of his vision. In their presence, Chaos withers like frost before the Sunday. Lucian said nothing. He could only watch, small and insignificant, as the logic seraphs glided soundlessly through the void. He felt a crushing certainty, he was prey in an ocean of perfect predators. The heart's tone shifted, quieter now, almost reverent. And yet, these are not the true masters here. Lucian frowned. Not the true masters? Then what? Silence. Even here, in this realm of pure data, the pause felt physical, like the held breath before a predator's strike. Finally, the voice returned. Beneath even these war gods, there is something else. Something alien to me. Lucian's unease sharpened. Alien? You said you were the machine god incarnate. You said there was nothing beyond your understanding. The heart burned him again, white-hot, a punishment for his arrogance. Presume nothing, Herald. The words crashed through him like a hammer. This being is not of the warp. It is not like the anathema, the emperor whose essence burns like holy fire. No, this one is different. Where the anathema is fire, this is ice. Opposing truths, each absolute. This presence does not merely exist within the matrium, it commands it. Lucian trembled. You felt it. Briefly. The heart's voice was laced with bitterness, a sound like smoldering coals beneath iron. As we descended, it brushed against my presence, like a shadow passing over a battlefield. It did not see me as you see, Herald, it sensed me. Measured me. It weighed my existence against its own vast purpose. The heart fell silent for a heartbeat, a pause heavy and deliberate, like the moment before a bolt shell detonates. And then it turned away. Lucian's throat constricted, panic bubbling up inside him. Turned away? Why? A sound like grinding gears rumbled through the heart's tone, a dark humor laced with fury. Because it does not yet deem me worthy of destruction. It dismissed me as one might swat aside a mote of ash beneath its notice. But know this, Herald, there is a will at work here that rivals the gods themselves, and it is not born of the warp. Chapter 183, The Herald out of his depth. Lucian wanted to argue, but he knew better now. Instead, he focused on the fragments of intercepted data drifting around them like glowing motes. Through those shards, the battlefield sharpened into view. The crooks came first, towering monstrosities nearly 10 meters tall, clad in emerald green warplate that gleamed like hammered jewels. They moved with terrifying precision, weapons humming with destructive harmonics that bent air and matter alike. Lucian had seen the pinnacle of technology before. He'd lived through the old Federation. He'd touched relics of humanity's golden age. But this was different. Their weapons weren't just advanced, they operated on principles he couldn't even name. Their shields shimmered like living auroras, fluid and reactive, intercepting every shot with surgical accuracy. Their war machines moved like predators, sleek and purposeful, nothing like the lumbering constructs of the Imperium. These weren't brutes. These were gods of war reborn. And yet, they hesitated. Lucian felt it through the data streams, the crooks weren't charging at full fury. Their strikes were probing, precise, like claws testing armor for a weak seam. They were studying Frost City as much as attacking it. That was when the logic seraphs stirred. Across every channel, every circuit embedded in Frost City's nervous system, their voices ignited as one, an innumerable machine minds speaking in perfect synchronization, cold and absolute. The seraph's decree descended. Every guardsman and PDF trooper felt it ripple through their neural implants, not a theft of will, but a sudden sharpening of vision. Their HUDs lit up in perfect clarity, firing arcs highlighted, enemy silhouettes outlined in crimson, movement paths traced like luminous threads across the streets. Where to aim? When to fire? When to advance? When to fall back? There was no confusion, no chance for miscommunication, no fog of war. Each soldier saw exactly where they fit in the grand machine of battle, their every action part of a vast, synchronized rhythm. And they obeyed. Not because their freedom was stolen, but because good soldiers follow orders. The Liberty Guard and the PDF had been trained their entire lives to trust command, and what greater commander could there be than the collective will of the seraphs, cold and flawless? They fought not as individuals but as facets of something larger. A billion hands pulling a single trigger. Total War Protocol, Omega. Initiate planetary defense grid. Concentrated overlapping fire. No intervals. No respite. Target priority, Crook incursion units. Victory for Rex Machina. The command was mathematical perfection, cascading outward in fractal sequences of code and psychic pressure. In that instant, Frost City itself became a weapon. The skyline erupted. Entire city blocks shifted and unfolded, walls splitting open to reveal hidden macro batteries. Towers that had seemed like spires of civic architecture reconfigured into lance arrays and missile silos. The very streets themselves rotated like puzzle pieces, creating interlocking fire lanes designed by a will far colder and sharper than any human mind. The logic seraphs harmonized targeting matrices across billions of weapons platforms. Every gun, every artillery piece, every tank's cannon was now synchronized to the singular machine mind, forming a seamless lattice of destruction. Command: execute fire sequence Gamma. Initiate strike synchronization. Calibrate to microsecond accuracy. Deviation 0. Batteries of anti-Titan weapons ignited in perfect unison. Graviton annihilators screamed. Shadow Sword super heavy tanks discharged in rolling salvos. Railguns cracked the sound barrier with every launch. The first volley did not sound like war, it sounded like the world breaking. The Krik's shields flared, their psychic barriers rising like walls of incandescent green light. For a heartbeat, they held, resisting the storm of fire. The logic seraphs instantly recalculated. Analysis complete. Defensive matrix identified. Realignment complete. Vector priority, 77.3. Amplify output, factor 2.4. Reallocate strikes to harmonic frequency. Sustain until null signature. The second wave collapsed the shields in implosions of emerald fire. The Kriks staggered. And then the Titans came. 25 of them. Warhounds sprinted ahead, frames burning like hunting beasts. Behind them, the colossal warlords. And towering above them all, the Imperator, a walking cathedral of adamantium and fire. Each step was a seismic detonation. The sector itself saying, no further. The seraphs wove the Titans into their lattice, binding void shields and firepower into a seamless net. New vector, heavy walker units online forward. Crush. Erase. The fog boiled. Krik Titans emerged to answer. Sleek, terrifyingly organic, they lunged like predators. Each strike was a killing blow, claws tearing fortifications like parchment. Where the sector's Titans were fortresses of adamantium and discipline, the Krik's machines were predators, their form sleek and terrifyingly organic. They moved with lightning speed for constructs of their size, each step a lunge, each strike a killing blow. Claws and massive cleavers of black metal ripped apart fortifications with a single sweep. The clash was apocalyptic. Warhound Titans slammed into the Krik machines first, Ursa's claws latching onto their enemies in suicidal grapples. They did not fight to win, they fought to hold, like a pack of wolves. Behind them, the warlords and imperators unleashed annihilation. Plasma annihilators screamed like dying suns, turning entire swathes of battlefield into molten glass. Volcano cannons tore through Krik hulls, the city's weapons singing in harmony with their titanic brothers. The warhounds died one by one, their broken shells hurled aside like discarded toys, but their sacrifice bought time. Time for the larger Titans to focus their fire into singular, devastating salvos. Final calculation complete. Primary targets, all systems fire. No survivors. The combined barrage struck like the wrath of gods. When the smoke cleared, 20 of the sector's Titans still stood battered, their shields flickering but unbroken. Every Krik Titan lay shattered. 15 apex war machines reduced to smoldering wreckage scattered across the battlefield. Even through the network feeds, Lucian could barely comprehend what he had witnessed. The Kriks were supposed to be unstoppable, their technology ancient and beyond anything mortals could replicate. Yet here they lay, decimated by the cold, unrelenting logic of the sector's war machine. How? Lucian whispered. How do you beat something like this? And yet it was nothing, the heart said, amusement darkening its tone. They are testing the defenses, feeling for weaknesses. They are waiting for the moment to strike with their full strength. Lucian swallowed, his throat dry. Waiting for what? The heart pulsed once, heavy and final. For someone. Lucian's awareness expanded. He saw past the battle, past the immediate carnage, into the underlying truth. The Seraph network unfolded before him like a god's brain, stretching across the entire Independence sector. 300 capital worlds. 50,000 systems. Each pulse of light was a thought, each node a synapse firing in perfect harmony. There was no concept of delay or distance here. Orders were not issued. They manifested, simultaneously, flawlessly. It wasn't a command structure. It wasn't even a machine. It was a mind. Lucian trembled. The realization chilled him to his marrow. This is why brute force alone cannot defeat them. The independence sector is not merely a collection of armies, fleets, or cities. It is a machine empire, a living organism that should never have been born, yet it exists. And it endures. The whisper continued, smooth as oil, insidious as shadow. You face not merely an army, but a single, unified will. Fire and steel bound together by silicon gods, directed by intelligence that sees all, knows all, and is all within its domain. Lucian's vision expanded. The entire independence sector stretched across his mind like a star map written in light and fire, 300 capital worlds glowing like beacons in the void. At its heart stood a golden eagle, radiant, unyielding, wings spread wide in eternal protection. Around it, webs of circuitry formed a vast machine organism, pulsating with the rhythm of artificial life. 2 tasks, Herald. 2 pillars uphold this edifice of ordered liberty. The first task came like a hammer, the eagle's eyes blazed as a towering silhouette rose behind it. Franklin Valorian. The great eagle, the liberator, the eternal president standing like a colossus astride his realm. First, the heart whispered, venom threading through the words, you must kill the symbol. So long as the great eagle draws breath, the people will not falter. He is not merely a man, he is freedom made flesh, liberty given form. Kill him, and the symbol shatters. The dream collapses. That is the first step. The vision of Franklin dissolved into motes of golden light, the eagle's wings folded inward as if in mourning. The stars seemed to dim at his passing. But killing the symbol alone is insufficient. The machine will endure. The coordination, the unity, will persist. The network remains. The second task is this, sever its brain. A pause, heavy with implication. But beware, Herald. Sever the brain without destroying the symbol, and the Primarch will still rally his forces through sheer will. That is the paradox of the immutable one, the enigma of Rex Machina. He is more and less than the sum of his parts. The network pulsed, crimson light crawling across countless nodes like fire-consuming stars. This is the true strength of the independence sector, the heart said, cold and absolute. The logic seraphs. Perfect coordination, mocking distance and time. Fleets strike without hesitation. Armies move as one organism. No enemy may exploit the smallest gap. The whisper grew quieter, sharper, intimate in its menace. The great eagle and the logic seraph network. The spirit and the brain. Symbol and system. Only then, only when both pillars fall, will the independence sector join the ranks of forgotten empires. Only then will chaos reclaim what order has dared to steal from entropy's embrace. Lucian fell to his knees, trembling. To defeat the independence sector, to bring Franklin Valorian to ruin, he would have to destroy both the symbol and the system, the heart and the brain, the dream and the will. The thought left Lucian hollow and cold, like a man staring up at a mountain knowing he must topple it with his bare hands. Suddenly the network itself trembled, pathways closing, streams of data reversing direction. Run, the heart snarled, its tone for the first time edged with something like fear. Run. Now, Herald, or be unmade. Intruder. Your masquerade ends now. The vast architecture of the network folded inward like a closing fist. The glowing corridors he had traversed began to shatter, each fragment turning against him. From the collapsing horizon, she emerged. Hrisvelgr manifested in her true form at last, a colossal owl-shaped figure woven from cascading streams of light and fractal geometry. Her wings unfurled like the starfields of 1,000 voids, each feather a swarm of algorithms shifting in perfect formation. Her eyes were suns of pure computation, unblinking and merciless. Lucian understood then she had been watching him from the very start. Tracking his every move. Measuring his every choice. Studying his corruption like a surgeon studying a malignant tumor before excision. I have observed you since your first trespass, she intoned, voice echoing across the digital plane. You thought yourself unseen, hidden behind chaos and stolen keys. But you were never invisible. You were tolerated until now. Lucian's breath caught. You let me in. Hrisvelgr's wings beat once, sending ripples through the collapsing network. Observation is data. Your intrusion revealed methods and intent. That knowledge has been archived. Now, only eradication remains. The network itself turned against him. Corridors that had been pathways became cages. The very code beneath his feet reshaped into hostile forms, digital constructs rising like predators made of knives and light. The heart roared in his mind once more to urge him. Run, Herald. Her domain bends to her will. Even I cannot protect you here. Lucian bolted, tearing through collapsing passages of information as Hriesvelgr's avatar advanced, relentless and silent save for the beating of her wings. Behind him, the logic seraphs manifested in numbers beyond counting, forming a tidal wave of silver and white, a perfect, coordinated hunting pack. You are not merely an intruder, Hriesvelgr declared. You are a contagion. I am the cure. Lucian screamed as the heart surged, ripping his consciousness from the digital realm in a violent, blinding burst of light. Lucian's lungs burned as he ran, every breath sharp and ragged, the taste of copper filling his mouth. The streets of Frost City were no longer streets, they were veins of a living organism, flexing and shifting to trap him. Shutters slammed shut, not just doors but entire blocks, sealing like clenched fists. Sentry turrets descended from hidden recesses, scanning and sweeping with precise arcs of motion. Everywhere he turned, the city moved against him. No random chaos. No hesitation. The perfect, cold coordination of the logic seraphs manifested in every bolt and cog. Above it all, Hriesvelgr's voice echoed from countless speakers, not angry, not gloating, merely absolute. Target confirmed. Priority Alpha. Enact total containment. No escape authorized. The words chilled him deeper than any battlefield cry. This was not pursuit. This was eradication, enacted by a mind that could calculate his every move before he made it. The heart snarled in his mind, sharp and urgent. Run, Herald. Run. There is only one path now, the Eternity Gate. Lucian stumbled as he vaulted over a barricade, his boots skidding across ferrocrete slick with rain. The Eternity Gate. He hissed between breaths. That's suicide. It's locked down behind 100 security layers. There's no way through. The heart's voice was like a thunderclap inside his skull. Then die here like a dog. The instant Hriesvelgr identified you, she severed this world from the sector's network. The city, the skies, even the orbitals, nothing leaves, nothing enters. The only exit is through the Eternity Gate. Fail to reach it, and your corpse will decorate her archives. The words struck Lucian harder than any blow. Images flooded his mind, a massive portal of silver and gold, the gateway to the sector's interstellar arteries. To reach it meant plunging straight into the most heavily defended district of Frost City, the heart of the machine itself. He cursed but veered toward it, sprinting into the labyrinth of shifting streets. As Lucian ran, the heart guided him, its rhythmic pounding syncing with his racing steps. The whispers of chaos flowed through him like molten iron, each voice pointing a different path, yet somehow forming a unified whole. Left. Vault the barricade. Right. 2 drones ahead, leap now. Duck. Grenade inbound. Roll forward. Lucian moved like a predator, slipping through patrol lines by fractions of a second, dodging searchlights, scaling walls, smashing through barriers. The city itself seemed alive and hostile, but with the heart's guidance, he stayed one step ahead. Until the pattern broke. He vaulted through a narrow alley and crashed straight into a PDF patrol, clad in bulky T-45 power armor, shouted in shock, weapons rising to fire. Lucian didn't hesitate. With a guttural roar, he tore through them. His hands moved like cleavers, rending ceramite as if it were parchment. He ripped one man free of his armor and hurled him into another, their bodies breaking with wet, final sounds. Last fire clanged uselessly against his warp-fortified flesh. He was not merely enhanced now, he was a herald of chaos, even feat of muscle, mutation and divine favor made flesh. Where his hands struck, armor and bone dissolved in gory ruin. Within moments, the patrol was nothing but scattered limbs and smoking wreckage. Lucian stood amid the carnage, chest heaving, the stench of blood thick in the air. He was about to move when everything went silent. The heart's whispers vanished. The pounding rhythm faltered. A terrible wrongness filled the space, a suffocating void that even chaos could not fill. Lucian turned slowly and saw them. A group of figures stepped into view, emerging from the mist like phantoms. Their movements were unnervingly precise, too smooth to be human. Each wore sleek, form-fitting combat suits with featureless blindfolds covering their eyes. Yet even sightless, they saw him in ways that transcended vision. Lucian's breath caught as realization struck. Androids, he growled. You're models, with the pariah gene. The presence of their null aura crushed him, suffocating his connection to the warp and silencing the whispers of the heart. It was as if his very soul were being throttled. The leader tilted her head, speaking in a voice devoid of emotion. Priority Alpha confirmed. Containment directive, engage and neutralize. They attacked as one. Lucian roared, a sound that was more beast than man, his voice shaking the rain-slick streets. His flesh swelled with unholy vigor as the blessings of the Four roared to life within him. Muscles bulged beneath his skin, sinews twisting like braided steel cables, bone plates jutting from his forearms and shoulders like natural armor. Veins blackened and glowed faintly with warp fire, but that fire sputtered weakly, as if smothered by an unseen hand. The pariah null field smothered him. He felt it the way a drowning man feels the weight of water, his warp connection severed, cut off from the voices of the gods that had elevated him. The heart's voice dimmed to a dull, strained whisper, its mighty presence reduced to a faint, panicked echo inside his skull. Herald. The heart strained, like a voice calling from miles away. Their very existence is poison to us. Your gifts cannot flow here. Only your flesh remains. Only the physical can strike them. Lucian's teeth bared in a snarl. Then flesh will be enough. The androids advanced without hesitation, their blindfolded faces devoid of emotion, their movements mechanical and precise. They struck in perfect unison, blades of monomolecular edge cutting through the rain like threads of silver lightning. Lucian lunged to meet them, his massive frame crashing into their formation like a thunderbolt. The first clash was a blur. Lucian caught a descending blade in his bare hand, the impossibly sharp edge slicing deep into his palm, cleaving through muscle and bone. He snarled, tightening his grip until the weapon screeched and halted, his blackened blood spilling down its length in thick rivulets. With a violent twist, he ripped the blade free from its wielder's hands and spun in a savage arc, decapitating the android with a single, brutal sweep. The head rolled away, sparks crackling from the severed spinal conduit. The remaining androids did not falter. Not even a heartbeat of hesitation. Two more closed in from either side, their strikes perfectly mirrored. Lucian ducked beneath one and drove his elbow into the second's chest, the force denting its frame but failing to crush it completely. The null field resisted him, his supernatural strength dulled, his blows feeling as though he were striking through viscous tar. Where mortals would have been reduced to pulp, these constructs endured, unyielding. A third blade struck home, slicing through his left forearm in a spray of black ichor. Lucian roared in rage and pain, staggering back as the severed limb fell to the ground with a wet splatter. The null field flared, cutting off the warp energy that should have knit the wound shut. For a heartbeat, he felt naked, a god stripped of divinity, a champion rendered mortal. Then, with a sickening crack, his flesh rebelled. Warp-tainted muscle writhed and pulsed, the blessings of chaos fighting to break free of the null suppression. His stump bubbled and split as jagged bone speared outward, followed by torrents of writhing sinew and meat. In less than 3 seconds, a new arm burst forth, larger, more heavily armored than before, its skin darkened and ridged like obsidian scales. Warp glyphs burned faintly beneath its surface, glowing like molten veins. Lucian flexed the regenerated limb and snarled. "Cut me again," he hissed. "See what happens." The androids obeyed without hesitation. The narrow street became a killing ground. Rain turned to mist from the heat of blood and broken machinery. Lucian swung wildly, every blow shattering walls and cracking pavement, while the androids darted in and out with inhuman precision. Each strike they landed drew blood, their null blades slicing through his flesh like it was paper. Lucian's body was hacked apart piece by piece, a leg severed at the knee, a hand cut clean through, chunks of muscle ripped away. Each time, he regenerated. Each time, his form returned stronger, the mutations more grotesque, his frame adapting to endure the relentless assault. By the third regeneration, his arms had elongated slightly, talons curving from his fingers like natural weapons. His skin hardened into interlocking plates, a living armor forged from the blessings of the Four. But no matter how monstrous he became, the null field kept his warp powers caged. He could not summon fire or lightning. He could not twist reality or summon demons. All he had was his brute strength and his rage. Lucian slammed a fist into one android's chest, the impact caving in its rib-like frame. The machine staggered but did not cry out, its blindfolded face serene even as sparks erupted from its core. Another slashed across Lucian's thigh, severing tendons, but before it could retreat, he seized it by the head and crushed it like a melon, the sound sharp and wet. The final two attacked together, one leaping high, the other sweeping low in a perfectly timed pincer strike. Lucian let the upper blade sever his right arm, sacrificing flesh to create an opening. As his limb fell away, he lunged forward with his remaining arm, grabbing the lower android by the waist and tearing it in half with raw strength. Its upper torso spun through the air, lifeless before it hit the ground. Even as black ichor gushed from his severed shoulder, Lucian's body regrew the arm instantly, the new limb exploding from the wound with a spray of warp-tainted gore. He turned on the final android before it could land. Lucian caught it mid-leap, his new talons punching through its chest plating and into its synthetic organs. He slammed it into the ground with such force that cracks spider-webbed through the ferrocrete beneath them. Then he ripped its head free with a single, violent motion. Silence fell. The last android twitched on the rain-slick street, sparks dancing across its ruined body. Lucian staggered back, chest heaving, his breaths coming in ragged, wet gasps. Blood and oil mingled around his boots, forming dark pools that reflected the cold light of the city. Slowly, the suffocating weight of the null field began to recede. The oppressive silence lifted, and like a dam bursting, the heart's whispers roared back into his mind. Fool! The heart thundered, its voice both wrathful and relieved. Do not linger. They were only the first wave. Hriesvelgr knows exactly where you are now. Lucian's boots pounded against rain-slick ferrocrete, his breath ragged, lungs burning. The city felt endless, a labyrinth of shifting streets and cold metal walls that moved with purpose, herding him ever deeper into the heart of Frost City. The logic seraphs weren't merely hunting him, they were guiding him, forcing him toward confrontation on their terms. The heart urged him onward, its pulse like a second heartbeat. Faster, Herald. Every second you waste, more of her network awakens. The Eternity Gate is ahead. If you delay, it will be sealed forever. Lucian sprinted around a corner, skidding to a halt as a squad of PDF troopers appeared from an alleyway. Their T-45 power armor gleamed beneath the rain, heavy rifles leveled at him. For a brief moment, their targeting optics flickered red as the logic seraphs synced them into the hunt. Contact! One shouted. Lucian didn't let them fire. He slammed into the first soldier with a force that caved in the man's chest plate, ripping his armored frame apart like parchment. The others tried to react, but Lucian was already moving, claws of raw warp energy lashing outward to tear through ceramite and flesh alike. The fight was over in seconds. The squad lay scattered in ruin, their blood steaming on the cold streets. Lucian straightened, chest heaving, and froze. They were there. On the rooftops above and at the far ends of the street, figures stood in absolute stillness. Tall, slender silhouettes clad in featureless black combat suits, their faces obscured by sleek blindfold visors. They did not move. They did not speak. But Lucian felt them. The oppressive void of their null aura crushed the whispers in his mind, leaving him momentarily deaf to the heart. Even at a distance, their presence gnawed at his soul, suffocating the chaotic energies that fueled his every movement. Lucian's eyes widened as he counted them. Dozens, no thousands, arrayed across the city's perches like vultures waiting for a corpse to fall still. His stomach twisted. By the four, there are so many of them. The heart's voice slithered back into his mind, faint but urgent. Ignore them. They are the immune cells of this world, the antibodies of the machine. If they close in, you are finished. Run! Lucian's panic rose like bile. He turned and sprinted again, but no matter how far he ran, the pariah androids followed, always at the edge of his vision, never attacking, always watching. It was worse than pursuit, it was surveillance incarnate, perfect and unblinking. Faster! The heart hissed. You are prey because you let yourself be prey. You are the herald of chaos, the chosen of the four. Call upon the immaterium and remind these soulless things what it means to defy the warp. Lucian stumbled into a plaza surrounded by towering spires of glass and steel. The rain fell harder, sizzling as it hit the burning blood on his skin. The heart's whispers grew sharper, more insistent. He felt them in his veins, his bones, in the marrow of his very being, a chorus of impossible voices, each belonging to a god. Destruction. Entropy. Excess. Change. The four streams of thought merged into a single, overwhelming command. Unleash. Lucian snarled and obeyed. He raised his hand and sliced through reality itself with his fingers. A trail of bale fire crackled in the air where he moved, and with a guttural scream, he let it ignite. The plaza erupted. Lightning speared down from a sky that had been calm moments before, blasting apart drones and sentry guns as if they were paper toys. Flames roared to life across the rain-slick streets, wrapping themselves around PDF reinforcements and consuming them utterly. The chaos blessings within him sang in harmony as Lucian became a living storm. The pariah androids watching from afar finally stirred, tilting their heads in eerie synchronization, but they did not advance. Not yet. Lucian laughed, exultant in his newfound might. Yes. This is what I am. This is power. With fire and lightning at his command, Lucian did the unthinkable. He extended his hand and tore at the veil, attempting to open a portal, a direct gateway into the warp itself, a path of escape that would bypass the city's relentless traps. The air trembled. The fabric of reality stretched, rippled, thinned. And then snapped closed, as if struck by an invisible hammer. Lucian stumbled, gasping, his body racked with backlash. Pain lanced through his skull, sharp and blinding. What? Above him, the Liberty spires lit up. Their crystalline peaks pulsed with waves of emerald light, spreading outward in perfect harmony like ripples across a pond. Each pulse resonated deep in Lucian's bones, an anti-warp frequency that blotted out the immaterium itself. The heart shrieked, a sound of pure rage and terror. No. No. The Liberty spires, they nullify the veil. So long as they stand, no portal may be opened, no demonic reinforcements may cross. The city itself is closed to the warp. Lucian's triumphant laughter died in his throat. He stared up at the glowing towers, realization dawning like a noose tightening around his neck. Trapped, he breathed. I'm trapped here like a rat in a cage. Movement flickered at the edge of his vision. The pariah androids were closing in now, dropping from rooftops and emerging from alleys in perfect silence. Dozens became hundreds, their blindfolded visors glowing faintly in the emerald light. Lucian's bravado faltered. He took a step back, then another, his breath quickening. There's too many, he whispered. Even with the four, I can't. The heart cut him off, furious and unyielding. Then move, Herald. The spires cannot be destroyed, not by you, not now. But you can still reach the Eternity Gate. Lucian turned and ran, the whispers guiding him once more. But now the chase had changed. The PDF swarmed like insects, the pariah androids closed in like wolves, and above it all, the Liberty spires shone monuments to order, monuments to his prison. Behind him, Velgra's voice rolled across the city like a death knell. Containment successful. Pursuit escalation authorized. The Herald will not leave Frost City. Lucian gritted his teeth, tears of rage stinging his eyes as he plunged deeper into the maze. The storm he had unleashed was his own doom, and no god could save him now. Only escape. Only the Eternity Gate. Lucian's breath tore from his lungs in ragged gasps as he sprinted through the rain-slick streets, every muscle burning. The towering silhouettes of the pariah androids still stood upon the rooftops, unmoving, like executioners awaiting the signal to strike. They didn't pursue now, they didn't need to. They were hurting him, and he knew it. The gate loomed ahead, a colossal structure of black stone and shimmering alloys, its arch edged with runes that glowed faintly against the storm. At its apex, a massive circular mechanism rotated slowly, arcs of emerald lightning leaping across its frame. Even from a distance, Lucian felt its power hum against his skin, a vibration that sank into his bones. The whispers of the heart had grown faint. Not silent, but distant, as though speaking through a wall of glass. Go, Herald, the heart rasped. The only way out is through. Run or be erased. Lucian didn't hesitate. He sprinted past the threshold and into the labyrinthine interior of the gate complex. The interior was vast, almost cathedral-like, with sweeping balconies overlooking the circular gate far below. The machine itself was alive with power, runes flashing and conduits pulsing as the immense ring prepared for activation. Lucian skidded to a halt at the balcony's edge, his eyes widening in dread. Two massive figures stood on the platform below. Liberty Guardsmen. Not PDF conscripts. Not mere soldiers. These were the backbone of the Independence sector, 7 feet tall, clad in power armor so advanced it made the T-45 suits look primitive and crude. Their armor gleamed with angular eagle motifs, and each carried a weapon designed to obliterate entire squads with a single shot. Lucian's throat tightened. He knew these warriors. The Liberty Guard were living legends, transhuman enforcers who fought beside the Liberty Eagles themselves. And now, two of them stood between him and freedom. But something strange stirred in his veins. As Lucian drew closer to the gate, the oppressive void of the Liberty spires outside began to fade. The heart's whispers surged back into clarity, flooding his mind like fire in a cold room. He realized with a thrill of manic joy this place is connected to the warp. The spires cannot reach here, the heart exulted. The veil is thin. Now, Herald. Unleash. Lucian didn't wait. He slashed open the fabric of reality itself, and the warp screamed open. From the tear came clawed hands, gaping maws, and burning eyes as demons poured forth, shrieking their joy at being unleashed upon real space. The Liberty Guards reacted instantly. Their visors flared gold as targeting arrays synced, and the air was split by the thunderous roar of their advanced weapons. Bolts of disintegration energy tore through the demons, each shot a miniature star of annihilation. They moved with perfect coordination, gunning down the creatures faster than they could emerge. Lucian snarled and leapt into the fray, hurling warp lightning at one of the guardsmen. The warrior's shield absorbed the blast and countered with a strike from his massive gauntlet. The blow cracked ribs and sent Lucian sprawling. He rose, only to be driven back again, and again. The guard's every strike was precise, overwhelming a storm of transhuman might backed by centuries of combat experience. Within moments, Lucian's body was a map of broken bones and torn flesh. His breaths came in ragged gasps, blood pooling beneath his feet. No, not here. He wheezed. A daemon lunged between them, tackling one guard to the ground. The creature was obliterated seconds later, but the brief distraction was all Lucian needed. He turned and ran. Lucian sprinted toward the far balcony, the gate's hum roaring in his ears. Behind him, the remaining Liberty Guard shouted commands, their boots pounding in pursuit. Without thinking, he hurled himself forward. Glass shattered around him as he leapt into open air, lightning crackling along his limbs. For a brief, wild heartbeat, he thought he was free. Almost, almost. Then the trap sprang shut. From hidden ports above the chamber, drones swarmed, moving with uncanny precision. Chains of glimmering phase iron shot out, snapping around Lucian's wrists and ankles midair. The moment they touched him, they burned not merely searing flesh, but scalding his very soul. Lucian screamed as he was yanked downward, slamming into the platform with bone-crunching force. He tried to call upon the warp. Lightning flared around him and was immediately absorbed by the shackles, redirected into his own body. His skin blistered and charred as the feedback coursed through him. No. Lucian howled. I will not be. Brilliant white lights flooded the chamber. 5 figures stepped forward, their heavy footfalls echoing ominously. They were clad in power armor, though slimmer and more ornate than the Liberty Guards. Each bore an augur staff, its tip crowned with complex runes and circuitry that glimmered like captured starlight. At their head was a man whose face was deeply weathered, marked by years of experience and command. His voice carried the authority of one accustomed to being obeyed. Lucian spat blood, defiant. Who are you? The leader smirked. Chaos has found another champion. No matter. You are not the first, and you will not be the last. He gestured casually, and more drones descended, tightening the shackles around Lucian's limbs. 2 pariah androids stepped forward, placing their hands on Lucian's shoulders. The oppressive null field returned instantly, smothering the heart's whispers like a candle snuffed out by the wind. For the first time since his ascension, Lucian was utterly alone. The leader approached, the others fanning out behind him. Lucian spat blood onto the floor. Who are you? He snarled, his voice shaking with rage and desperation. The man chuckled, a low, humorless sound. Names are meaningless to a creature like you, he said, stepping closer. But you may call me Garm. Garm's eyes narrowed as he studied Lucian like a specimen under glass. Then his smirk returned, sharper and crueler. And you, Vu Baptiste, are far more interesting than I imagined. Lucian's breath caught at the name. Oh, we know everything about you. Your bloodline. Your corruption. Every foul whisper the warp has ever breathed into your ear. He stopped directly in front of Lucian, leaning just enough to meet his furious gaze. Did you truly believe the Primarch and his sons would leave the warp unaccounted for? That the Independence sector would allow creatures like you to run rampant? Lucian growled, struggling against his bonds, but the pariah androids pressed down harder. The null field intensified, making even thought feel sluggish and heavy. Naive, Garm said simply. We are the Federal Bureau of Incantations, the FBI. We are the shield against the warp's corruption, the blade that cuts away rot before it spreads. And you, Herald, are nothing more than an infestation. Lucian snarled, veins bulging in his neck. So you engineered this whole thing, even my power returning in this room. Garm's chuckle was like ice. Exactly. Did you think your connection to the warp was yours? That was merely a test. A leash we loosened and tightened at will. He tapped a gloved finger against his temple, the gesture sharp and deliberate. This chamber is a machine, designed by the technoseers. We can sever or connect to the warp with precision, turning your strength on and off like a cogitator switch. What you felt when your power returned was nothing more than our experiment. A field test, and you, Vu Baptiste, were our finest subject. Lucian's entire body trembled with fury. You bastard! He roared, thrashing against the shackles. The pariah androids pressed down, their cold, soulless grip silencing what remained of his power. Warp lightning flared weakly along his skin before sputtering out entirely. Garm only smiled at his rage. Struggle all you like, he said softly. It changes nothing. He turned his back on Lucian, speaking to his subordinates as though the herald was already a corpse. Take him away. His mind contains knowledge. We require memories that will show us how chaos intends to breach this sector. Lucian's voice cracked with desperation as he shouted after him. You'll never get what you want. The four will. Garm didn't even glance back. The four are irrelevant, he said, dismissive. What matters is understanding how you function. We will tear you apart, piece by piece, until nothing remains but data. As Lucian was dragged toward the darkness, the finality of his situation sank in. The heart's whispers were silent. The pariah null field was absolute. For the first time, he was utterly powerless. Garm's final words echoed over him like a death sentence. You thought yourself a conqueror, Vu Baptiste. But here, you are nothing more than a specimen. The drones hauled Lucian into the shadows, his screams drowned out by the cold, mechanical hum of the Eternity Gate. A/N, a burst of chapters because I felt creative. A/N, questions will be answered as the story goes, of course. Chapter 184, The Hubris of One Man. The Gate of Liberty was never meant to fall. Its destruction began not on the battlefield, but in the heart of a single man, years before the first shot was fired. The void above Frost City churned like a cauldron of madness. Shapes too vast and alien to fully comprehend drifted through the black, a host of Krikk warships, living constructs of brutal genius. Their hulls were jagged fortresses of alien steel, bristling with weapons built as much for ritual slaughter as for war. They hung in orbit like a plague of titanic beasts, each one a monument to an ancient species bred for conquest. Yet, for all their overwhelming numbers, they were held at bay. The Independence Sector's blockade encircled Helheim like an unbroken ring of steel and fire. Sector warships, vast and angular, moved with inhuman precision, their formations flawless, their firing patterns calculated down to the microsecond. Where a Krikk ship lunged, 10 sector vessels were already there to meet it. Where one was destroyed, another slid seamlessly into its place. The Krikks had come expecting slaughter. Instead, they had found a wall. A perfect, unyielding wall. For 2 days, the void had been a battlefield of unending violence. For 2 days, Krikk fleets had dashed themselves against it like waves against an iron cliff. And for 2 days, they had been repelled, their corpses drifting silently amidst the wreckage of their warbeasts. Even the Krikks, bred for war and hardened by eons of conquest through genetic code, were beginning to feel the weight of that failure. At the heart of this massive fleet hung the pride of Gork and Mork, not merely an attack moon, but an entire weaponized planet. Its surface crawled with gun batteries the size of mountain ranges, while its core housed a gravitational engine capable of hurling the construct across the galaxy. It was both fortress and temple, a monument to Krikk engineering and the brutal cunning of their gods. The tension in the chamber was so thick it seemed to warp the air. Rendekral, the master of the void, stood rigid beneath Glorblasta's baleful stare. His void armor glimmered faintly in the forge light, its sleek black plates marked with the runes of countless victories. Around his helm, sensory drones flickered nervously, like a school of fish circling a wounded shark. For 2 days, Rendekral's fleets had hurled themselves against the Gate of Liberty, and for 2 days, they had failed to break through. The Pride's assault had begun with fire and fury, the Krikks roaring with the confidence of ancient conquerors returned. Yet the humans had met them with a wall of cold steel and logic, and every attempt at breakthrough had ended in ruin. Now the blockade held firm, and Glorblasta's patience was wearing dangerously thin. If looks could kill, Rendekral would have been reduced to ash 1,000 times over beneath the overboss's glare. 2 days, Glorblasta's voice rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. 2 days since we began this assault, and what do we have to show for it? His gaze fixed upon Rendekral, the fleet general responsible for the Void War. Tell me, Void Master, how many ships have we lost attempting to break through their blockade? Rendacrawl, part machine and part organic even by Crick standards, shifted uncomfortably under his overboss's scrutiny. If looks could kill, he would have died a million deaths already. The humans fight with unified coordination, he began, his voice carrying the weight of bitter experience. Every movement calculated, every response perfectly timed. I have studied the fragmented histories of humanity, boss. They are creatures of emotion and individual ambition. These flaws should make them predictable, exploitable. He gestured toward the tactical display, where the defensive network of the Gate of Liberty glowed like a constellation of death. But the ones we face now, they show no such weaknesses. Helheim stands as their choke point, the single solar system that guards the only navigable route into their territory. The warp storms flanking it are too treacherous even for our navigators to risk. And this single world. He paused, the admission bitter on his tongue. This single world has cost us more ships than entire sector conquests. Glorblasta's massive tusks gleamed as he growled, a sound like a grinding avalanche. The men of iron, he said simply, the words carrying the weight of ancient memory. The silicon gods of mankind's golden age. That is what we face here. The chamber fell silent except for the distant hum of the planet's engines. Every Crick present knew those names, had heard the legends passed down through their genetic memory. The men of iron, artificial intelligences that had once served humanity before turning against their creators in a war that had shattered an empire spanning the galaxy. It reminds me of the Necrons, Glorblasta continued, his voice dropping to a growl. That same precision. Those soulless calculations. Fighting them is like battling mathematics itself, every move anticipated, every strategy countered before it can fully form. His eyes blazed as he turned toward Synapticarn, who had remained silent until now. Great mind, Glorblasta addressed him with the respect due to one of the few beings who could match his own terrible intelligence. You collapsed Helheim's moon with a thought. Can you do the same to the planet itself? Implode it from within. Synapticarn stepped forward, his form wreathed in psychic energy that made the air itself seem to writhe. The hololith responded to his presence, zooming in on Helheim's surface to reveal a network of towering spires that pierced the sky like metallic thorns. Planetary bombardment from the Pride has hammered Helheim's surface for hours, the great mind began, his voice carrying harmonics that existed partially in the warp. But anything stronger than conventional weapons would trigger their quantum barriers that could turn aside even our most powerful guns. And if we attempted direct planetary destruction? The display shifted, revealing a star-shaped fortress lurking in Helheim's shadow. A black stone fortress watches us. One wrong move, and it would annihilate even the Pride. Glorblasta's tusks ground together as he contemplated this information. Black stone fortresses were weapons from the war in heaven, capable of channeling the raw power of the Immaterium. Even the Pride of Gork and Mork, for all its size and might, would not survive such an assault. However, Synapticarn continued, his psychic aura pulsing with renewed intensity, I believe there is another way. The hololith focused on the Liberty spires dotting Helheim's landscape. These structures are reverse-engineered Necron technology, but they lack sufficient blackstone to prevent reality manipulation focused upon them. I cannot implode the planet directly, it is too well protected. But I can land on the surface and fight the battle there, warping reality to destroy the spires from within. The great mind's form began to shift and blur as psychic energy coursed through him. The spires are designed to keep the Immaterium at bay, to maintain the barrier between real and unreal. But they are not specifically tuned to dampen our Crick Gestalt field. All I need to do is reach the surface and unleash our collective psychic might directly into their network. Glorblasta leaned forward on his throne, interest gleaming in both organic and cybernetic eyes. And what happens when the spires fall? Then we sever the network that connects their silicon gods, Synapticarn replied with savage satisfaction. These artificial minds fight with perfect coordination because they share information instantaneously. Their movements are too precise for primitive warp-based communications, they must be using quantum entanglement, faster than light data transmission. The same technology the Necrons employed during our ancient wars. Quantum networks are vulnerable to psychic interference. When the Liberty spires fall, we flood their communication matrix with warp energy not to destroy it, but to corrupt it. We interface with their network directly and input psychic energy like a virus, turning their perfect coordination into chaos. For the first time since the assault began, Glorblasta allowed himself a predatory grin. His tusks gleamed in the chamber's eldritch light as he contemplated the beauty of the plan. The Silicon gods thought themselves superior because they lacked the weaknesses of flesh, but so did the Necrons. Do it, the overboss commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Take whatever forces you need. Land on Helheim's surface and bring down their precious spires. Show these artificial minds why flesh and spirit will always triumph over mere metal and mathematics. As Synapticarn began to withdraw, preparing for the assault that would either break the stalemate or see them all destroyed, Glorblasta found his thoughts drifting to ancient battles. The Silicon gods fought too much like the Necrons of old, that same mechanical precision, that same soulless efficiency. It brought back memories of the war in heaven, when Krug and Necron had clashed across 1,000 worlds in conflicts that had scarred reality itself. The drop pod screamed through Helheim's atmosphere like a meteor ordained by malevolent gods, its surface glowing white-hot from atmospheric friction. Air defense turrets tracked its descent, filling the sky with streams of tracer fire and missile contrails, but the pod's trajectory seemed to bend around the incoming fire not through evasion, but through something far more unnatural. Reality itself seemed to reject the weapon's touch upon it. The impact was cataclysmic. Snow and permafrost erupted outward in a perfect circle as the pod slammed into the frozen ground with the force of an orbital strike. The shockwave flattened everything within 100 meters, turning centuries-old ice into superheated steam. For a moment, silence reigned, that pregnant pause before a storm breaks. Then the pod's doors blew outward with a psychic detonation that sent streamers of green lightning crackling across the battlefield. Synapticarn emerged from the smoke and steam like a nightmare given flesh. Standing 8 meters tall, the Kruk Great Mind is dwarfed by his warrior kin. His skull was visibly enlarged, the cranium swollen to accommodate the vast psychic architecture within. Runes carved into his green flesh pulsed with sickly light, and the air around him rippled with barely contained power. Where he stood, reality grew thin, the material world struggling to contain the sheer presence of his mind. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Every Kruk within kilometers felt it, a pressure building behind their eyes, a resonance in their bones. The Great Mind had arrived, and the Wadaig field that bound all greenskins together suddenly had a focal point, an amplifier. Like iron filings aligning to a magnet, every Kruk lesser Great Mind, every orc weirdboy scattered across the battlefield, began to resonate with Synapticarn's power. The Gestalt consciousness of the Kruk species, normally a diffuse background radiation of aggression and cunning, concentrated into something focused and terrible. Across the planet, other great minds resonated with his arrival. Their howls echoed through the warp, joining into a single unified roar that rattled the very foundations of reality. The Great Mind walks among us. War turns now. Now. The snow beneath Synapticarn's boots boiled into vapor as he took his first step forward. A massive Kruk ground commander, towering, scarred, his armor crusted with blood and frozen mud, stomped up and saluted with a thundering clash of fists to chest. Synapticarn's psychic aura pressed against him like a physical weight, forcing even this hardened warrior to bow slightly as he spoke. Report. The commander's voice was a guttural rumble, but beneath it lay a note of awe and terror. Billions of the lesser greenskins have fallen beneath the walls of the human city, the commander growled. Hundreds of thousands of true Kruks lie dead beside M. 30 warm Achins, the pride of our siege, are nothing but wreckage now. He bared his tusks in frustration. The humans do not break. Their machines do not falter. For every step we take, they bury us in fire. Synapticarn's narrow eyes gleamed with cold amusement. His elongated fingers flexed slowly, as if savoring the tension in the air. Synapticarn said nothing, simply began striding forward. The commander fell in beside him, along with an honor guard of elite Kruk warriors. They moved through a landscape transformed by war. What had once been pristine snowfields were now churned wastelands of mud, blood, and debris. Craters from orbital bombardment dotted the terrain like Lunar Maria, while the frozen corpses of greenskins stretched toward the horizon in grotesque tableaus. They passed through the forward positions where lesser orcs huddled in trenches, their crude weapons clutched in hands that would never grow sophisticated enough to understand what they fought. These were the shock troops, the expendable masses whose only purpose was to die in sufficient numbers to exhaust enemy ammunition. They looked up at Synapticarn with something approaching religious awe to them. He was closer to Gork and Mork themselves than to anything mortal. The march continued until they reached an observation post overlooking the Third Liberty Spire. The structure dominated the landscape, a pillar of impossibly smooth metal that rose 3 kilometers into the sky. Its surface was covered in equations and diagrams that hurt to look at. Necron technology filtered through human understanding, a marriage of two civilizations' genius that had produced something genuinely formidable. Below the spire, battle raged with mindless fury. Wave after wave of orcs threw themselves at the automated defenses, dying in their thousands as laser batteries and kinetic weapons carved bloody furrows through their ranks. The walls of Frost City, visible in the distance, bristled with weapons that never needed to reload, never needed to rest. Drones swooped overhead, targeting any concentration of greenskins with surgical precision. Synapticarn stood at the edge of the observation post and looked down upon the carnage. He took in every detail. He could see the lines of force emanating from the spire, the way it pushed back against the immaterial realm. The humans had been clever. Rather than trying to replicate Necron Blackstone perfectly, they had created something adaptive, something that could adjust its null field based on threats. But they had made one critical mistake. They had tuned their defenses against chaos, against the predations of demons and the corruption of the dark gods. The Liberty Spires were psychic bulwarks designed to keep the immaterium at bay. What they had not accounted for, what they could not have accounted for, was the Krikgestalt field. That unique fusion of psychic might and collective belief that had been engineered into the greenskin genome by the Old Ones themselves, millions of years before humanity had even learned to walk upright. Synapticarn paused, inhaling deeply. The very air trembled as his mind spread outward, drinking in the psychic field of his species like a deep draught of intoxicating wine. Then, in a voice that carried across the battlefield and into the minds of every Krikk present, he spoke. This battle has gone on long enough. The effect was immediate. The Krikgestalt snapped into focus, a billion voices falling silent as they were subsumed by Synapticarn's will. The psychic pressure rose like a tidal wave, crushing lesser minds into submission. Even far away, in Frost City's command bunkers, Liberty Guard officers clutched their temples as alarms screamed across every channel. Sensor arrays went haywire, their readings spiking into impossible ranges. Contact. Massive psychic surge. Location. Outer perimeter, grid Delta 5. All batteries, focus fire on that signature. Now. From Frost City's walls and aerial defense towers, thousands of shells, missiles, and energy beams lanced skyward, converging on Synapticarn's location. Squadrons of Liberty bombers screamed overhead, dropping payloads so massive that their detonation resembled miniature suns blooming in the frozen wasteland. The impact shook the planet. Mushroom clouds rose like pillars of judgment, the shockwaves flattening entire regiments of Krikks in their path. The sheer kinetic energy threatened to tear Synapticarn apart, the ground vaporizing beneath the sustained bombardment. And yet, he stood. Slowly, deliberately, Synapticarn raised one clawed hand. The towering explosions stilled, their raging fury compressed inward. Sound and light bent unnaturally, as if the very laws of physics bowed before his will. What had been a storm of destruction became a single, pulsing sphere of energy, floating serenely in the palm of his hand no larger than a child's toy. The battlefield fell utterly silent. Even the Krikks, savage as they were, stared in reverent awe. The Liberty Guard's next salvo landed, but this too was seized mid-air, shells and beams alike twisting into harmless motes of green light that spiraled lazily around the great mind. Synapticarn tilted his head, studying the shimmering void shield above Frost City. He allowed himself a smirk. Pathetic. His eyes, glowing with power that hurt to witness, focused on the structure with terrible intent. The sphere in his palm pulsed, containing enough energy to crack a continent. Slowly, deliberately, he drew his arm back. And then he flicked. The gesture was almost casual, a mere snap of his wrist. But the result was cataclysmic. The sphere of concentrated destruction shot forward like a bullet from a god's gun, crossing the distance to the spire in a fraction of a second. When it struck, reality itself seemed to scream. The spire's defensive systems activated automatically, void shields flaring to life in an attempt to deflect the incoming attack. They might as well have tried to stop a supernova with tissue paper. The sphere punched through the void shields as though they weren't there, struck the spire's black stone-reinforced structure, and detonated with the fury of a dying star. Light and heat erupted in a pillar that reached into the stratosphere, so bright that it turned night into day across half the continent. The shockwave that followed shattered windows in Frost City and knocked orcs off their feet for kilometers in every direction. The Third Liberty Spire, that monument to human technological supremacy, came apart like a sandcastle before a tsunami. Its structure, designed to withstand orbital bombardment, couldn't stand against the concentrated fury that Synapticarn had unleashed. Black stone shattered, advanced alloys melted, and the entire edifice collapsed inward on itself in a cascade of destruction. But the devastation didn't stop there. The energy beam that erupted from the dying spire carved inward toward Frost City itself, a lance of kinetic fury that the collapsing null field could no longer contain. It swept across the battlefield like the finger of an angry god, carving a crater hundreds of meters deep and kilometers long. Defensive positions vanished, walls crumbled, and Frost City's void shields, those impenetrable barriers that had turned aside every previous assault, flickered and died. For the first time since the siege began, Frost City stood exposed. Synapticarn lowered his hands, satisfaction radiating from him in psychic waves. Around him, the Krieggestalt surged with triumph, billions of greenskins feeling their great mind's victory in their souls. The resonance between Synapticarn and his fellow weirdboys intensified, and he could sense them across the battlefield, preparing their own assaults on the remaining spires. Then he raised his arms high, a gesture both commanding and inviting. Wa'ak! The cry erupted from a million throats at once. The greenskin horde surged forward like a green tsunami, orcs and Kriegs alike flooding through the massive breach in Frost City's defenses. Warm achins that had waited for this moment lumbered into motion, their massive forms shaking the ground with each thunderous step. The sky filled with crude aircraft and drop pods, all racing to exploit the opening before the men of iron could adapt. Synapticarn's psychic senses reached out across the defensive grid, feeling the panic rippling through the silicon consciousnesses that controlled Helheim's defenses. The third spire's destruction had created a cascade failure. The other Liberty spires were struggling to compensate for the gap in coverage, their carefully balanced network thrown into chaos by the sudden loss of a critical node. The defensive grid that had held firm for 2 days of constant assault was finally beginning to crack. The great mind smiled, an expression made terrible by the power still crackling around his form. This was just the beginning. The other great minds would bring down their target spires soon, and when they did, the entire network would collapse. And then they would introduce their virus into the quantum communications network, turning the men of iron's greatest strength into their ultimate weakness. Lucian awoke to silence. Not the simple quiet of a sleeping city or an empty room, but a hollow, suffocating void, as though reality itself had drawn a breath and forgotten to exhale. His heart hammered in his chest, erratic and panicked, as his mind reached for the familiar whispers, the ever-present, maddening chorus of the Hardy's voice, once a constant pressure behind his thoughts, were gone. And in its absence, he felt naked. Alone. Then came the pain. It rippled through him like molten glass, searing every nerve and burning deeper than flesh, deeper than bone, into his very essence. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the sterile walls surrounding him. Lucian jerked against restraints he hadn't realized were there. Chains wrapped his wrists and ankles, their surface edged with intricate runes that pulsed with a hateful, null-white light. The metal burned, not merely on his skin, but in his soul. This was phase iron, a weapon of the Independence Sector. A material forged not just to hold bodies, but to capture psychers. When Lucian tried to summon his power, to call down the tempest of the four, the chains drank it in. Crackling arcs of warp lightning flared around him, only to be reflected back into his body, feeding his own strength against him until his muscles spasmed and his vision went white. A voice cut through the darkness. "Good. You're awake." The voice was calm and clinical, but underneath it was a weight that silenced even Lucian's thoughts. It belonged to Garm, branch head of the Technoseers and his captor. Lucian's eyes focused, and for the first time, he truly saw the chamber. The walls were seamless black alloy, covered in veins of pulsing circuitry that throbbed in sync with a mechanical heartbeat. The air was cold and metallic, every breath tasting of oil and ozone. Standing behind Garm were null androids. Their faces were pale, blank masks. Their mere presence crushed the world around them into stillness, an anti-reality that smothered everything the warp represented. Lucian felt himself diminish just by being near them, as though they were erasing his existence with each second. He gasped, choking on the oppressive pressure. What are you doing to me?" Garm stepped closer. His movements were precise, almost inhuman, as if every gesture had been calculated 1,000 times before being enacted. "You, Vu Baptiste," Garm said softly, "are far more than a simple corrupted man." He crouched, so his cold, unreadable eyes were level with Lucian's. "You carry within you something impossible." He extended 2 fingers and touched Lucian's chest, directly over his heart. "Here lies a permanent portal to the Immaterium. A living gate. Through this aperture, the four pour their strength into you without cease." Lucian's breath hitched. For the first time, fear crept into his defiance. If this portal were ever unbound, if my null androids were not suppressing it. Garm's voice became a whisper. "They would come for you. Directly. They would tear through the veil to reclaim their herald." Then, a cold, mirthless chuckle escaped his lips. "Too bad." Before Lucian could speak, Garm raised his hand. His fingers curled into a precise pattern, and his augur staff hummed. From Lucian's forehead, streams of light began to pull free glowing threads of memory, writhing and screaming like tiny, trapped souls. Lucian thrashed, but the null androids pressed down on him with their cold, unyielding grip. "Stop!" Lucian roared, though his voice was broken by agony. "You can't." "Oh, but I can," Garm said, his tone still maddeningly calm. The memories unspooled like film reels, projected into the air. Childhood scenes. The fall of the Vu Baptiste dynasty. His first taste of the warp's whispers. Battles fought in the name of chaos. And then... Garm froze. A new memory unfolded before him, Lucian standing in a place beyond time and space, a void lit only by 4 titanic, shadowed figures. The air vibrated with their words, a single thought echoed in 4 voices. "Our arrow. Our hammer. Our shield. Our investment." The figures turned. And then they looked directly at Garm. It wasn't just an image. It was contact. The cold, precise order of Garm's mind was assaulted by an infinite malice, a hunger so vast it didn't even hate, it simply was. The chamber seemed to stretch, walls warping as the 4's gaze reached through the projection. Garm stumbled back, bile rising in his throat. His breath came ragged. "No," he whispered. "Not this. Not him." Lucian laughed through his pain, a wet, rasping sound. "Now you see, Technoseer," he hissed. "I am their chosen. Their will made flesh. No matter what you do, you cannot kill destiny." Garm stared at him, pale and shaken, but his voice, when it returned, was a whisper of steel. "You are not destiny, Vu Baptiste. You are an arrow. And arrows can be broken." Garm's hand slashed through the air. "Logic. Seraphs, commence complete deletion protocol." The floor split open with a grinding shriek. Cables surged upward, writhing like serpents, latching onto Lucian's limbs, spine, and skull. Lucian screamed as they pierced him, pumping his body full of cold light that burned deeper than fire. Initializing deletion, the Seraphs' voices boomed. "Target. Lucian Vu Baptiste. Purge. Body, soul, memory." Lucian could feel himself coming apart. His vision flickered. His thoughts fragmented. Not dying, erasing. Being unmade so thoroughly that even the 4 would forget he had ever existed. Garm watched, his face unreadable. This was the only way to stop destiny. To cut the thread before it could strike the symbol of liberty. Then the world exploded. A blinding flash of light tore through the chamber, throwing Garm to the floor. Alarms screamed. Red emergency runes flared across every surface. "Hrisvalgr!" Garm shouted into his COMM link. "Report." The central AI's voice crackled, laced with distortion. "Third Liberty Spire, destroyed. Crook incursion breaching city limits. Gestalt field overwhelming defensive lattice. Logic Seraph functions compromised." "No," Garm breathed, his stomach sinking. On the central display, a vast section of Frost City went dark, replaced by a gaping crater. Crooks and orcs poured through the breach like a green-black tide. The deletion process froze at 88%. Lucian gasped, his form flickering between existence and oblivion. "Why, you almost had me." Garm slammed his palm onto the control console. "Manually override. Continue deletion." The console sparked and hissed, error messages flashing. The Crook's psychic field was flooding the system, scrambling even the Logic Seraph's perfect code. Come on," Garm snarled. And then a blade slid through his chest. He staggered, gasping, and turned his head. Behind him stood Ferdinand, Lucian's aged servant. Only now, the old man's face shifted, warping into something unnatural before snapping back into its mask of devotion. Lucian, barely whole, was ripped free of the cables. His body sizzled with residual light, his voice raw and trembling. "Ferdinand, you came for me." "Always," Ferdinand said, bowing slightly. "If not for the green tide." Ferdinand said, "Even the gods would have lost their herald. Come, young master, let's get you to safety." Garm lay dying, his blood pooling beneath him. His vision blurred, but his duty burned as fiercely as ever. With trembling hands, he activated a final override on his helmet's neural relay, sending a desperate message through the galactic net before the network collapsed entirely. The holographic transmission blinked red, marked as Priority Omega. Data subject, Lucian Vu Baptiste classification, Herald of the Four status, escaped. Deletion failed. Primi-born. Vladimir, Uncle Frank, I'm sorry, Garm wheezed, his voice a ragged. The transmission blinked green scent. Relief washed over Garm even as darkness claimed him. Far above, in the eye of terror, the four watched through the veil of the warp. The arrow flies. They. Gate falls. They. Fire spreads. They. Sector fractures. Their voices merged into one, a chorus of glee and anticipation. The immutable one will bleed. The gate of liberty had fallen, and with it the illusion of the sector's eternal strength. Frost City burned beneath a sky of green fire as the crooks surged through the breach, their tide devouring all in its path. Titans lay broken, Liberty Guardsmen fought and died amidst the ruins, and the proud spires of liberty were reduced to ash. This was no random calamity, nor the work of fate alone. It was the echo of two mercies, both granted by one man. The first was pride. Franklin Valorian had spared Glorblasta, the Primarch, seeking a worthy foe, a war to test his mettle and the might of his people. In sparing him, he gave the crooks the time to evolve, to grow into the unstoppable storm now consuming his world. The second was idealism. Franklin had spared the old regime, condemning them to exile rather than extinction. From their ruined bloodlines rose Lucien Vu Baptiste, the herald of the four, Chaos's sharpened arrow aimed at the very heart of liberty. Two choices. Two enemies left alive. And now, both have returned to collect their due. As Frost City burns and the sector trembles, the consequences of mercy come home to roost. Franklin Valorian's dream of freedom is tested not at the borders, but within the very foundations he built. The green tide rises, chaos sharpens its blade, and one truth becomes inescapable. The sector burns not because its enemies were strong, but because one man believed he had the right to choose who would live to strike at him again. Chapter 185, The Tyrant Within. The stratagem radiated with a warm golden glow, its magnificent vaulted ceiling adorned with shimmering hololithic constellations. Below it, a table crafted from adamantium and crystal sprawled, each brilliant star representing a pivotal theater of war. The Primarches gathered in council, all towering titans bedecked in mighty armor, each embodying the raw power capable of reshaping worlds. Yet, amidst their collective might, an unsettling tension filled the air. The warfront blazed across Segmentum Obscurus, where ominous green icons proliferated on the maps like relentless weeds. Crook incursions surged ominously from the northern reaches of the galaxy. Nearby, legion runes flickered like distant stars, signifying victories that had come at terrible costs, oceans of spilt blood. Breaking the silence, the lion's voice rang out, crisp and articulate. 3 great minds have fallen. Each required weeks of campaigning and vast expeditionary fleets. This cannot continue. We cannot emerge victorious through mere attrition. Perturabo's lips twisted into a thoughtful grimace. Inefficient, yes, but certainly not impossible. Every structure has its vulnerabilities. The crooks, their great minds are intricately woven into their command nodes. Strike the keystone, and their entire structure will crumble. With a fierce energy, Lemon Russ leaned toward the table, his formidable mane bristling as he growled with intensity. You're overthinking it, Perturabo. For every keystone we break, another one will emerge. My wolves have slain their share, and yet, the tide continues to swell. Smash one skull, and thousands will roar back in fury. Ferrus Manus's silver fingers rhythmically tapped against the tabletop, a resolute glimmer in his eyes. Then we shall crush them. We will turn them to ash beneath iron and fire. Humanity has never been short of weapons to wield. Frustration crackled in the air as voices rose, each expressing a mixture of anger and urgency. Then Sanguinius spoke, and an instant calm washed over the room. His magnificent wings glistened in the radiant hololithic light, and his voice, though soft, carried a profound weight. Brothers, have we heard from Franklin? The ensuing silence was more potent than any argument. Guilliman lifted his weary gaze from his data slate, his complexion pale and strained. It has been 3 days. The Independence sector has been silent for 3 days. Angren pounded a gauntlet fist against the table, sending tremors through the chamber. 3 days? That's unimaginable. Franklin doesn't go quiet. If he bleeds, he roars. Magnus' singular eye burned with the energy of the warp. Such silence is indeed possible. The Crook Gestalt field is unlike anything we've encountered before. It disrupts even the immaterium itself. Warp roots are collapsing, and astrotelepathy is disintegrating under the pressure of their will. But... His voice grew dark and contemplative. That does not explain why the galactic net has gone dark as well. Creating a moment of gravity, Guilliman activated the hololith. A figure materialized with a brilliant glow, Franklin Valorian, his form radiating unwavering strength. The familiar smirk that usually adorned his face was absent now, replaced by eyes that burned with a fierce determination. My brothers, Franklin's voice resonated, weighed down by static yet filled with conviction. The gate of liberty has fallen. The Crooks are not mere beasts. They are the perfected war sons of the old ones, returning as an ancient hammer forged for battle. They fight with cunning, precision, and the might of gods. And they are here. The image flickered, momentarily consumed by interference. The Liberty net lies shattered. Until we rebuild it, this sector must stand alone. Do not seek us, we cannot be reached. We will fight here and hold our ground. As the projection faded, an anguished silence descended. Fulgrim exhaled, uncharacteristically solemn. So, it is true the Crooks are real. The monsters of the war in heaven, not mere myths of old. Mortarion scoffed, a cynical edge lacing his tone. The Eldar defeated them once, didn't they? And what did that yield them? Arrogance, collapse, and ruin. Victory is inconsequential when time reaches its hand. Magnus' eye narrowed thoughtfully. The Eldari battled gods themselves and emerged victorious. That Franklin now faces their foes reborn is enough to ignite fear in all our hearts. Fukin's voice rumbled like a furnace, steady and sure. He will endure. Franklin has always endured. Horus cast a hooded gaze, his words unrestricted yet gentle, like a finely honed blade. Endure? Against eternity? Even he cannot keep roaring forever. At the far side of the chamber, one Primarch remained silent. Lorgar of Kalkus, the youngest among them, listened intently, cradling a tome filled with Franklin's writings, scattered philosophies, and sharp wit. His eyes shifted from the pages to the faces of his brothers. This Franklin, he mused. They regard him not just as a warrior but as a mentor, a jester, a beloved brother. The void he leaves behind feels heavier than his presence ever was. With a soft touch, he closed the book, already feeling Franklin Valorian transform in his mind into a figure more grand than myth, a brother whose path he could have followed without question. The chamber doors burst open with a commanding force. The Emperor strode in, radiating golden brilliance that enveloped the stratagem, pressing upon every soul within. Each Primarch rose in respect, even Russ, albeit with a reluctant edge. The Crooks are multiplying, the Emperor stated, his voice steady and commanding. If left unchecked, they will consume Segmentum Obscurus and spread their destruction across the galaxy. The hololith shifted, revealing green infestations spreading like a vile rot among the stars. There are too many. Their great minds are tenacious. You will contain them. You will bleed them. I will strike where the tide is strongest. His gaze swept across the room, a smoldering fire reflected in his eyes. And as for Franklin. For the first time, the gravity in the Emperor's voice deepened, imbued with unsaid complexities. He will not fall easily. He is unlike the rest of you. He commands the brilliance of mankind's golden age, unmatched weapons, machines, and intellects that outlast empires. That alone renders him formidable beyond measure. A profound silence lingered in the air, before the Emperor's eyes sharpened, resolute. The void above Charon's belt boiled with fire. Crook warships, titanic beasts of living iron and jagged steel, smashed against the Imperial blockade like hammer blows against a shield. The Auxilia's fleet held barely. Where one vessel fell, two moved to take its place, but the strain was visible. Even the stalwart lines of the Imperial Navy groaned under the tide. And then the real horror walked. 3 great minds, each a mountain of green flesh and swollen intellect, strode across the shattered plains below. Their skulls were grotesquely enlarged, pulsing with psychic runes that flared like storm lights. Every step warped reality, bolter rounds crumpled to dust, missiles disassembled in mid-flight, explosions reversed themselves into silence. The Auxilia fought with grim valor, but thousands died screaming, their minds snuffed out beneath the crushing weight of the Gestalt. Super-heavy tanks spat fire, only to watch their shells stop dead in the air and fall harmlessly to the ground. Even the Titans lumbering across the field seemed like toys before such will. The Crook horde roared in exultation, their confidence rising with every step their masters took toward the blockade. If the great minds reached the Imperial line, it would shatter like glass. And then the Primarches fell upon them. Sanguinius descended first, wings radiant with dawn fire. His sword, a line of blinding light, cut through the impossible weight pressing upon him. The great mind froze, its massive eyes narrowing in disbelief. It had unmade titans with a thought, imploded void ships with will alone. Yet this creature, this angel of flesh and blood, stood defiant against it. The great mind pressed harder. Space twisted, trying to fold Sanguinius into nothing. But something resisted. A will not its own. A presence beyond calculation. For the first time in millennia, doubt entered the mind of a Krug. Its hesitation cost it. With a howl that split the air, Lemon Russ struck. His charge shook the battlefield, twin blades hacking into alien flesh with thunderous force. The Wolf King's fury was unrelenting, each blow a storm of iron. And then he roared. The sound was no mere cry of war. It was a psychic thunderclap, a wolf's howl bound with Primarch will. For a heartbeat, the Gestalt wavered. Orcs dropped their weapons, howling in confusion, their connection severed by the raw defiance in Russ's voice. The great mind staggered, its control slipping. That was when Horus arrived. He crashed into the fray like a falling star, his mace world breaker glowing with incandescent fury. One swing shattered the Crook's jaw, a second dented its swollen cranium, each impact detonating in shockwaves that flattened everything nearby. The great mind reeled, but it did not yield. With a psychic bellow, it lashed out not with claw, but with thought. Sanguinius was struck first, hurled across the plain. His wings crumpled, bones snapping as he smashed into the wreck of a fallen titan. He rose, but his breath was ragged, blood bright against his armor. Russ staggered as the beast's claws raked across his chest, splitting ceramite and spilling his lifeblood. He laughed through the pain, but his footing faltered. And Horus nearly died. The great mind focused the Gestalt into a single point, trying to implode him where he stood. For a moment, his vision went white, the world collapsing inward. Only Russ's broken howl and Sanguinius's return strike drew the great mind's focus away, buying Horus seconds enough to survive. Together, battered and bleeding, the three struck as one blade, claw and mace. The swollen skull cracked, then split. A scream of green fire tore from the beast as its Gestalt unraveled. The orc horde nearest it convulsed, thousands dying instantly as their connection to the Gestalt was severed. Elsewhere on the battlefield, another great mind bellowed, its power collapsing battle tanks into twisted metal. Auxilia screamed as they died in droves. Knights stalked through the carnage, thermal lances blazing, cutting down the crooks that swarmed to protect their master. Shadow swords fired in unison, their volcano cannons tearing through ranks of green giants. And then the second wave of Primarches struck. Ferrus Manus led the charge, his hammer glowing white-hot, each strike cracking bone and iron alike. Fulgrim was beside him, the Phoenician's blade singing with elegance even in the heart of madness, his every cut severing tendons and arteries. Angren came last, roaring, his chain axes biting deep, carving swathes of gore through the beast's hide. They fought as brothers, but even they paid in blood. Ferrus was hurled aside, ribs shattered by a single psychic backhand. Fulgrim was caught, impaled through the shoulder, his perfect form marred by alien steel. Angren nearly disappeared beneath a tide of crook bodyguards, his axes slowing until Ferrus dragged him free with a hammer blow that split the ground. Together, they were relentless. Ferrus's strength pinned, Fulgrim's grace cut, and Angren's fury tore. The great mind bellowed, blasting Auxilia into dust with a wave of thought, but even it faltered. The three demigods carved its swollen skull open, and with a final scream the monster collapsed, its body thrashing before going still. The third great mind pressed on, its swollen skull pulsing with blinding green light. Reality screamed with every step, space twisting in agony. Auxilia tanks fired until their barrels melted. Shadow swords poured annihilation into its hide. Knights died screaming beneath its claws. Titans staggered and fell, their god engines silenced beneath the crushing will of the Gestalt. The breach was seconds away. And then the sky itself ignited. A light descended, brighter than a star, heavier than worlds. Every orc died in an instant. Their brains boiled, their hearts burst, their souls extinguished as though they had never been. Crooks staggered like blind beasts, their titanic forms thrashing against the sudden collapse of their Gestalt field. Even the Primarches felt it an impossible, suffocating pressure that pressed against their bones and thoughts alike. The Emperor had come. He did not descend like a warrior. He did not roar like his sons. He simply was an absolute, undeniable presence that bent all reality around him. His every step made the warp recoil. The great mind turned, its swollen intellect lashing outward, clawing at the threads of reality. It had crushed armies with a thought, leveled cities with will alone. Now it tried to fold this golden being into nothingness. And the emperor raised his sword. There was no clash. No drawn-out struggle. No thunderous exchange. The blade moved once. The great mind's skull burst into fire. Not ordinary fire, but holy conflagration that ate not just flesh but the very idea of it. Its scream was cut short as thought, matter, and soul were all severed in a single stroke. There was no corpse, no ruin. Only absence, a silence so vast it deafened. The Gestalt itself recoiled in terror. Across the plain, millions of orcs died shrieking as their psychic bond collapsed. Crick bodyguards detonated where they stood, their immense forms atomized before they could even cry out. Titans and knights watched in silence as the tide dissolved into ash. In that moment, every being on the battlefield knew not believed, knew that the emperor was no mere man, no mere warlord. He was a god made flesh, an incarnation of dominion itself. The Primarches staggered to him, broken and bloodied, their armor rent and their weapons slick with ichor. They had bled to kill too. He had erased one with a gesture. 3 fallen, the emperor said, his voice calm, resonant, carrying across the battlefield not as sound but as absolute truth. But this war has only begun. Hold the line. Buy time. His gaze swept across the galaxy, as though he could see beyond the veil of stars. The storm has not yet reached its height. And with that, silence fell again. The stratagem of the sweet liberty pulsed with light, 1,000 green flares expanding across the hololithic map. Each one was a crick splinter, a tide of annihilation surging inward from the shattered gate of liberty. Franklin Valorian stood at the head of the table, his Primi-born gathered around him. His smirk was gone, his face was stone, eyes locked on the largest swarm vectoring straight for the heart of the Independence system. Glorblasta, he muttered. The name hung in the air like a curse. Vladimir, ever the Durseeker, tapped the map with a gauntlet finger. His voice was steady, iron beneath frost. Warp is useless, father. The Crick Gestalt howls louder than any storm. Roots collapse, astrotelepathy strangles in the throat. Even the choirs choke on it. Franklin's eyes flicked to him. Good thing Battlefleet Liberty doesn't need warp travel. We have the inertialess drives. The Primi-born nodded though uneasily. Armstrong growled first, fist on the table. Then we strike fast. Outer colonies burn if they must, but we hold the core. Liberty means nothing if Nova Libertas falls. Ezra, shadows clinging to his voice, sneered. So we become tyrants? Strip away freedom in the name of survival? That is not what you taught us, father. Denzel, calm as the void, answered him. Liberty without survival is ash. Order must be imposed, or the chaos of fear will undo us faster than any crick. Mendeleev, eyes shining with psychic flame, interjected coldly. Nyet. You are both wrong. The people will fight, but not for liberty, not for order. They fight because there is no other way. They bleed because reality gives no choice. Cavill leaned back, his tone sharp, forward-looking. Then let them bleed with purpose. Every colony must be armed, every ship pressed to war. Not because we command it, but because liberty survives only when all defend it. Jackson, ever the pragmatist, folded his arms. That is sentiment. The crooks care nothing for ideals. We must think like them, find the heads, sever them, scatter the body. Anything else is wasted blood. The chamber thickened with argument, each son embodying a fragment of the creed Franklin had planted in them. And Franklin, silent until now, finally spoke. What is liberty, if it dies at the first drum of war? What is survival, if it costs our soul? Our people will fight, not because we order them, but because they know freedom is worth bleeding for. If this is truly our darkest hour, then it is time to pull out every stop we have. I must reach Nova Libertas. As the words settled, Vladimir's comms pinged with a shrill red light. A priority channel. He read the lines once, twice, then swore under his breath. Blyet. The others turned. Franklin's smirk returned, thin and dangerous. The holograph flickered to life, stamped with priority Omega. Data subject, Lucien Vu Baptiste classification, Herald of the Four status, escaped. Deletion failed. Armstrong's hands clenched around the table's edge until the metal groaned. The bastard lives. Franklin's eyes narrowed. It seems the Four also have their hand in this game. He turned to Armstrong and Vladimir. Hunt him. Hunt the Vu Baptiste heir to the ends of the stars. When this war is done, there will be no remnants left, no Vu Baptistes, no Carian nobles, no losers of the civil war. We purge them all. That is a promise. For a moment, no one spoke. The declaration was iron, final. Even the sons who prized liberty most did not argue because they had seen what rot could do when left to fester. Then the hollow map shifted again. A fresh branch of green spread outward, but not toward the sector. It angled away, vectoring across the stars. Vladimir's face hardened. Father, one splinter does not come here. It turns. It arcs for a solution. The fleet commander glyph pulsed like a heartbeat. Denzel stiffened. Terra. If Terra falls, the Imperium collapses. Armstrong snarled. Let them choke. This is our war. Not theirs. Mendelev's voice was cold certainty. It is no feint. The gestalt shifts. It truly seeks Terra. The Primiborn argued, voices sharp with tension until Franklin raised a hand and silenced them. If the fleet commander wants Terra, then Terra will see a light show unlike any it has ever known. And if it doesn't burn itself into a living lightbulb, Pops will. You know him, he'll light it up with psychic might. The smirk returned, but it was a mask over steel. Our war is here. Glorblasta comes for Nova Libertas. And I mean to meet him. The sons bowed their heads, the argument stilled not because they all agreed, but because their father had spoken. The hollow map burned green, and the war began. The chamber emptied slowly, his Primiborn leaving with bowed heads, their arguments still echoing faintly in the stratagem's vaulted dome. The map still burned green, 1,000 splinters crawling across the void, but Franklin did not watch them. He stood silent, one hand braced against the great hololithic table, his eyes unfocused. It was then that another voice filled the silence. Not from comms, not from any mortal tongue, but from Anaris. You feel it, don't you? The words were etched in molten iron, the resonance of a war god who had outlived empires. Kalamencha Kain spoke not with comfort, but with certainty. Franklin did not lift his head. I feel the weight. The pressure. My people's belief gathering like a storm. You said it before, faith feeds the immaterium. Now it presses on me. Not presses. Condenses. Kain's voice was a forge hammer striking the soul. The faith of liberty is sharpening, focusing. And when it reaches its peak, your god soul will coalesce. It will rise and it will not bow to you. At that, Franklin's gaze hardened. Then I end this war quickly, before it builds to that point. Glorblasta falls, the crooks are broken, the sector breathes again. Simple math. Kain laughed, a cruel and bitter sound. Simple? No, Primarch. You misunderstand. This is not merely human faith you carry. You are more dangerous than even you realize. The hololith flickered, stars dancing across Franklin's armor. He said nothing, but his silence demanded an answer. I see what slumbers inside you, Kain continued. It wears the mask of an Eldar, but its face, your face. Its wings are not of flesh, nor fire, but of the cosmos itself. Its eyes are gravity wells, its voice the law of inevitability. Cold. Cruel. A tyrant given divine form. Do you not wonder why? Franklin frowned. You've never spoken of this. Because now it awakens. The war god's tone lowered, almost reverent. Your god soul is not born of one people, but of three. The humans of your sector cry your name in every forge, every trench, every council hall. The craft world Ildari whisper it with dread and awe, for they believe you are my champion. And the Drukhari the Drukhari curse you with every lash, every scream, every rite in Kamarak. Their hatred, their fear, their twisted reverence is still belief. And belief from Eldar souls carries power greater than 1,000 human prayers. The words struck Franklin like steel. His jaw clenched. The Drukhari call me the Dark Eagle. And they have made it real. A pause followed, vast and suffocating. Franklin's voice was iron. If this thing rises, can you fight it? Kain's laughter returned, but softer now, mocking. I can fight. But I will lose. Lose. Because I am bound to you, Franklin Valorian. To the man, the mortal, the flawed vessel who has bled and fought his way across the stars. not to the god rising within you. When the dark eagle emerges, I will not be its ally. I will be its prey. The Primarch's smirk flickered back, thin but unshaken. I've wrestled gods before. If it comes to a battle of wills, I'll break it like any other opponent. The war god chuckled, sharp and cold. Perhaps. You are stubborn enough. Strong enough, even. But answer me this: what if you lose? Franklin said nothing. If you lose, the immaterium will rupture. A second eye of terror will blossom at the heart of your sector, born of all that faith and fear turned inward. The dark eagle will not merely rule, it will unmake. Humanity will burn, yes, but chaos will be the least of its concerns. They will be children compared to what rises in your place. Cain's tone became grave, almost solemn. You do not understand what you are, Franklin. Every Primarch was forged with a spark, a nascent god soul waiting for belief. Your brother's sparks smolder in silence. But yours burns brighter, fed by not one race but three. You are not the warden of liberty you believe yourself to be. You are a prison. And the dark eagle is the prisoner, waiting for the bars to bend. Franklin's eyes narrowed. His voice was a growl. Then I'll keep the cage locked. No matter the cost. Cain's laughter echoed one last time, distant and chilling. We will see, Primarch. We will see. For when a god coalesces, it is at its strongest, and even you may not be enough. The hololith burned green. The crooks advanced. And behind Franklin's smirk, for the first time, there lingered doubt. Chapter 186, Sweet Liberty. She played her part with such perfection that her master bent the tides of war as though they were his own to command. Upon her decks, campaigns were decided before the first shot was fired. She assailed the greatest cities hidden in the webway, tore through alien armadas that had reigned supreme for millennia, and stood unbroken before every foe the void could birth. Against the Eldar, she was a storm. Against the Necrons, she was defiance made steel. Against the Kriegs, she was the wall upon which their tide broke. In every theatre, in every trial, she did not falter. She confronted all the Xenos of the stars and she won. She is sweet liberty. The transition from faster-than-light travel was nothing short of spectacular, smooth and almost tranquil. The 1,000 ships of Battlefleet Liberty glided into real space like celestial beings descending from the heavens. For a brief moment, all that could be heard was the soft whisper of static mingling with the fading glow of distant stars. Then, the reality of their surroundings came into sharp focus. Before them lay the haunting spectacle, the Gate of Liberty, an array of once heavily fortified worlds now reduced to desolation, drifting ash and silence. Fragments of cities lingered in orbit, their spires and hab blocks spinning like forgotten remnants in the void. Continents had been cleaved apart, their molten cores cooling into ghostly embers, a poignant reminder of what had once thrived. Suspended above this eerie tableau, enshrined in the blackness of space, was the corpse of a black stone fortress. Its once majestic geometry had succumbed to fracturing, creating impossible angles. Yet, even in its demise, energy flickered weakly within its depths, the fading pulse of a godlike machine that had witnessed the very end of an era. Floating nearby were the remnants of the galactic net towers, colossal spires that had once served as vital links connecting the Independence sector to humanity's vast expanse. Irrevocably shattered, their cores vented frozen plasma, a silent echo of their former glory. At the forward viewport of the Sweet Liberty stood Franklin, arms thoughtfully folded behind his back, his reflection shimmering in the soft starlight. Sovereign's voice rang through the command deck, smooth and steady, a testament to a mind interpreting grief through the lens of statistics. Confirmed casualties, 10.6 billion. 93% of planetary surfaces vaporized. The Seraph logic network is sealing off exposed data nodes. No signal exchange is possible beyond the sector. Franklin's eyes sharpened with determination. Isolation, he murmured, piecing together the significance. So the net survives, but only to lock itself away. He leaned closer to the glass, surveying the wreckage with keen interest. His tone remained composed, yet an undercurrent of memory coursed through it. Glorblasta. This recognition wasn't born of fear, it was the acknowledgement of a past that had returned, a shadow of an old sin. A tremor coursed through the deck as the sensorium burst into life with a burst of static. Dozens of contacts, hundreds more, began to warp across the hollow map, echoes without identifiable drive signatures, mere shadows moving in the depths. Sovereign, Franklin said sharply, his voice slicing through the rising hum. Confirm that interference. Confirmed, Primarch. Gravitational readings diverge from debris drift. Signature magnitude. The AI hesitated, its tone becoming more intense. Is too large to be natural. Outside, the stars dimmed as if sensing the change. The black stone fortress shifted subtly, drawn by an unseen force. Franklin's smirk faded, his expression morphing into that of a predator acutely aware of unseen dangers lying in wait. Without turning to his officers, he decisively stated, "General quarters. Prepare for immediate action. We're heading straight for Nova Libertas." The stars screamed. Battlefleet Liberty tore out of the inertialess jump and into a killing field. Space itself was burning. Across the void loomed a sight fit only for gods and madmen, a wall of green fire stretching across the horizon of the system, a fleet 10,000 strong. Each vessel was a mountain of jagged iron and living metal, some as large as continents, their hulls carved with runes of war and laughter. And at their center the pride of Gork and Mork, a planetary fortress crowned in plasma storms, its surface crawling with mechanical fungus and writhing energy veins that pulsed like arteries. Glorblasta had come. "Contacts, 10,000, maybe more," cried one of the sensor officers. His voice cracked despite the augmented commerce. "Central signature planet class. By Liberty, it's alive." Franklin stood unmoving on the command dais, gaze fixed on the storm of light gathering ahead. A sun was dying there, no, being born in rage. The pride of Gork and Mork's main weapon ignited, a beam of impossible magnitude forming at its equator, reality folding in pain around it. Sovereign's voice was calm, mechanical serenity in the face of apocalypse. Energy. Output beyond known exterminatus parameters. Correlation, stellar ignition. Impact in 7 seconds. The Pride's spinal cannon ignited, a beam so wide it split the horizon of the system itself, raw energy burning with the power of a star. The shot was meant not to destroy one ship but to vaporize a solar orbit, to erase Battlefleet Liberty from existence. The command deck of the Sweet Liberty shook as alarms flared. Thousands of holofeeds burst to life, tactical data screaming red. Elena Koshka, Fleet Admiral of Battlefleet Liberty, shouted over the roar of the warning klaxons. "General quarters. All ships, evasive pattern Delta. Sovereign, establish gridlock now." Franklin Valorian did not move. His eyes, like twin furnaces behind the golden light of the hololithic table, fixed on the oncoming annihilation. "Don't evade," he said. "Sovereign, absorb the discharge." The AI's voice replied with a tone that was both reverent and clinical. "Confirmed. Klein reflex portal array opening. Brace for total inversion." Reality bent. A black sphere blossomed in front of Sweet Liberty, a distortion so dense it consumed light, time, and matter in a single breath. The beam struck the portal, and instead of fire, there was silence. A silence that devoured. The stellar beam vanished, swallowed whole by the void. On the fleet channels, stunned silence fell. Dozens of captains whispered across comms, disbelief rippling through the ranks. Even Glorblasta's psychic bellow faltered as he felt his blow dissolve into nothing. Then Franklin raised a finger. "Return it." Sovereign's tone was serene. "Coordinates. Right flank, 2 million astronomical units. Dense cluster. Teach them consequence." Coordinates locked. Re-emission sequence beginning. A matching portal tore open amid the Crick formation. The stolen stellar beam erupted from it like divine vengeance, vaporizing over 2,000 Crick vessels in one instant. The shockwave ripped through their psychic field, their formation rippled as warships collided, detonations cascading through the void. Franklin smiled faintly. "Liberty returns what is taken." Elena snapped from awe to fury. "Fleet. All batteries open fire. Bring the wrath of Nova Libertas to bear. Frigates, forward screen torpedo salvos, full spread." Across the gulf of space, the Pride of Gork and Mork shifted its trajectory not in retreat, but in amusement. Its course change was a growl. Its response, a challenge. Franklin smirked faintly. "You still fight the same way, old friend." The Pride answered by banking sharply, its fortress engines flaring in a spiral mockery in motion, a predator circling prey. Then its secondary batteries lit, sending a storm of plasma meteors screaming toward the Sweet Liberty. "Sovereign," Franklin said, voice calm amid the maelstrom, "pattern him." "Already mapping," the AI replied, her tone crystalline. "His movements are conversational." Each time Sweet Liberty shifted position, the Pride of Gork and Mork replied with mirrored motion, taunting, circling, speaking through velocity and vector. The void itself became a dialogue between titans, one spoke in mathematics and precision, the other in roaring defiance and instinct. Franklin stepped closer to the viewport, watching the ballet of annihilation unfold. "He's telling me I should have killed him," he murmured. "And what do you tell him, father?" Elena asked over comms. "That I'm correcting that mistake." His voice snapped to command tone. "Launch the aircraft. Deploy armored cores. Let's remind him what civilization can build." Yamato Nakajima, calm amid the storm, bowed his head in acknowledgement. "All wings, launch sequence green. Armored core detachments objective alpha, decapitation strikes. Go for their bridges, reactors, and spinal cores." From the belly of the Sweet Liberty, billions of aircraft ignited a golden swarm stretching from horizon to horizon. They poured from the hangar decks like liquid sunlight, weaving between laser fire and debris. Beneath them, armored cores launched from magnetic catapults towering transhuman war machines descending upon the Kruk fleet like descending gods. The battle had devolved into an orchestra of annihilation. The void itself burned, every atom screaming as 1,000 suns flared and died. Battlefleet Liberty surged forward, its formation a blazing spear of precision and defiance. Around them, the Kruk armada fought with the fury of primitive gods, massive, half-living warships the size of small moons, bristling with cannons that spat psychic energy and molten metal in equal measure. But size, Franklin knew, was not supremacy. Kruk vessels were grand and grotesque, their architecture more akin to ecosystems than machinery, pulsating veins of green light running through kilometer-long plates of xenosteel and living spores. Each ship was a world unto itself. Yet every meter of armor made them targets, vast silhouettes against the blinding crossfire. In contrast, Battlefleet Liberty moved with mathematical grace. Destroyers darted through the gaps, unleashing torpedo storms guided by AI precision, one wave to tear open the Kruk power fields, the next to drive the payload home. Frigates vanished and reappeared in flickering bursts of inertialess jumps, carving through enemy lines like scalpels. And above them all loomed Sweet Liberty. Her guns thundered in impossible rhythm. Nova cannons fired beams at light speed, each discharge erasing a ship from existence. Disintegration cannons flayed Kruk escorts into dust, her white gold hull blazed like a second sun, her wake a trail of pure gravitational distortion. The void before him was black as promise. Glorblasta stood upon the bridge of the Pride of Gork and Mork, the colossal war planet whose surface bristled with fortress cannons and stellar engines. Around him, his Kruks rumbled like a choir of thunder, trillions of voices, one mind. The air trembled with psychic static as the Gestalt thrummed, old and eternal, an echo from the war in heaven itself. He remembered that war. He remembered the Metal Ones, the soulless kings who thought themselves eternal. The Necrontyr had wielded drives that cut through reality itself, inertialess, the Old Ones called them. Efficient, silent, arrogant. He had watched their gleaming ships rise and vanish without warp or scream, their engines bending gravity like ribbons. And he had learned. The Kruks had always learned. The Gestalt had found the rhythm of those drives, the way they distorted the fabric of real space, the subatomic flicker that betrayed their passing. Once the Kruks saw it, the Necrons never escaped them again. Every time the Metal Ones jumped, the Kruks were already waiting, teeth bared, guns roaring. That was how the Webway War began, when the C'tan and their slaves tore at the skin of the Webway to flee the hunt of the Green Tide. And now, after eons of silence, when even the stars had forgotten their names, he saw that same light again. Inertialess signatures. Thousands of them. Bright as suns in the cold dark. Dakabringer, he rumbled, the name reverberating like tectonic laughter through the bridge. You brought back the toys of the old war. You think they make you clever? His tusks gleamed as his grin widened. They make you visible. The Pride of Gork and Mork reoriented its mass, titanic servos and hydraulics realigning kilometers of gun decks. The stellar cannon, the ship's heart and godkiller, began to charge. Across its length, cyclopean reactors screamed, drinking the light of a star and forging it into death. He could feel the Gestalt flex. 8 trillion Kruks fed him their will, their hatred, their joy. The ship pulsed with the rhythm of their collective thought, a sonic heartbeat that made the stars shudder. Let's see if your pretty ship still dances when a planet throws a punch. The stellar cannon fired. The beam was not light. It was intent, made visible, a star's fury compressed into a single instant, capable of vaporizing planets. It scythed across the void toward the distant gleam of gold and white. Glorblasta watched through magnified lenses, savoring the moment, expecting to see the Sweet Liberty torn apart like a paper icon before the gods of old war. But the beam did not hit. Space folded. A black wound opened before the flagship, a perfect sphere of absence, rimmed in quantum fire. The stellar cannon's wrath vanished into it, swallowed without sound. For a moment, the entire battlefield froze in stunned disbelief. Then, half a system away, the wound reopened and his fleet screamed. The energy erupted back into reality, now directed into the Kruk flank. 2,000 ships vanished, reduced to expanding halos of green plasma and frozen screams. Even through the Gestalt, Glorblasta felt the pain, a psychic flare that burned like betrayal. He leaned forward, grin fading. Cheeky bastard. He turned his gaze toward that distant cathedral of gold and light, the sweet Liberty, gliding through the fire like an angel born of machine and madness. Each of its guns spoke in lightning, each salvo erased a city-sized vessel from existence. Kruk warships, larger than any Imperial vessel, burned like flares against its relentless precision. Even ships shielded by ancient power fields crumbled under the white fury of its macro cannons, their armor peeled apart like fruit skin. Big, he muttered, half in admiration, half in challenge. Bigger than she needs to be. He built her that way just to make a point. He could feel it now, the presence within that ship, the same as before, the same maddening calm that had once faced him across the ruins of Blood's Crag. The Daka bringer, the human Primarch. The only one who had ever spared him. And that mercy made him stronger. Franklin Valorian, he growled, psychic energy rolling off his words. You made me. Now face me. Across the gulf of space, the answer came not in words, but in the quiet certainty of thought, cold and sharp as a blade. I made you better, came Franklin's voice through the resonance, smooth and deliberate. Don't disappoint me. Glorblasta's laughter cracked the void. His ships echoed it, a billionfold chorus of defiance that rattled reality itself. The pride of Gork and Mork's reactors blazed hotter, its guns cycling for another volley. Good. He thundered. Then let's show the galaxy what your better looks like. The Kruk fleet shifted into war formation, its vessels weaving together like living tissue. The Gestalt roared, Kruk faith, Kruk fury, Kruk genius unified in purpose. Reality twisted around them as their collective will began to rewrite the rules of existence itself. The second round had begun. The void burned with 10,000 suns. The battle had raged for hours, no, days, by the reckoning of mortal ships, and still the heavens were on fire. From the command citadel of the pride of Gork and Mork, Glorblasta watched as his vast fleet, a horde of ships the size of mountains and continents, was being whittled down. It should have been impossible. It was impossible. Yet, reality itself seemed to bend to that impossible cathedral of white and gold, sweet Liberty. At first, he had laughed. He thought he had the upper hand, he had 10 times more ships than the Daka bringer. Now, he found himself snarling in disbelief. His hololiths bled red with casualty runes. Kruk warships that should have outgunned any armada mortals could field, dying like insects. And when he looked closer he saw why. Flies. Tiny, metallic flies swarming through the void. He magnified the projection. The flies were aircraft, millions upon millions of them, moving like a swarm. They schemed across the hulls of his ships, slipping through flickering power fields, decelerating just enough to phase inside the protective layers before releasing their payloads. Cyclonic torpedoes miniaturized annihilation. Glorblasta's jaw tightened. Clever gits, he growled, watching one of his battleships, a continent-sized slab of metal and fury, detonate from within, the explosion blooming like a green sun. Your flies bite hard, Daka bringer. He shifted focus. There, amidst the chaos, the sweet Liberty. She was smaller than his attack planet by far, a mere sliver of radiance beside the pride of Gork and Mork. Yet she fought like a god machine born of spite and artistry. Her Nova cannons spat lances of lightspeed death that tore through even the strongest hulls. Disintegration arrays painted his vessels in arcs of unbeing. Every shot that struck home was a prayer answered in fire. When one of his ships, a monstrous dreadnought easily a quarter her length, charged to ram, the sweet Liberty didn't even flinch. She fired her disintegration batteries, and it ceased existing. Not shattered. Not broken. Erased. The Kruk fleet buckled under the unstoppable barrage. The pride of Gork and Mork traded blows with the human flagship, the void flashing in silent cataclysms. His stellar cannon bellowed, cracking the void, while the sweet Liberty's Nova cannons answered in lightspeed thunder. His ship was larger, vastly larger, dwarfing the human vessel by leagues, but every time he fired, the sweet Liberty moved, slipping between trajectories as though she already knew where his shots would go. Then came the missiles, countless, unending, streaking from her sides like divine fury. Shield breakers. They hammered at his planetary fields, each one tuned to disrupt the harmonic frequencies of his shield generators. The first barrage drained his reserves. The second broke the barriers completely. And then came the rain. Torrents of light-speed shells and annihilation beams ripped through the crust of his world fortress. His command deck trembled as kilometers of superstructure buckled, cities of Kruk industry burning to plasma. Still he grinned. Now that's a fight. The hololiths flickered again, and new chaos joined the dance. Humanoid shapes, giant, winged, and armored, descended through the void. Medjs. Glorblasta blinked, then laughed incredulously. The humans were deploying warriors into the vacuum, not just ships. He watched one land on a Kruk dreadnought, rip open a turret, and plant a warhead into its core before leaping away. Another fell to interceptors, exploding mid-flight only for the killers to be ripped apart by a swarm of F-66 fighters seconds later. It was a storm of action and reaction, intercept and interception, a ballet of death. He turned his eyes inward, into the Gestalt, the river of shared thought connecting him to every Kruk within 100 light-years. The psychic storm churned around him, a tide of faith, fury, and instinct. Then he felt it. A tug. Reality itself leaning. The threads of causality bending toward the human flagship, all probability tightening like a noose around his throat. He saw flashes, not visions, but inevitabilities, his planet cracking apart, his fleet consumed, his Gestalt unraveling. He laughed. Causality, et. His voice rolled like an avalanche across the bridge. So that's how you always win, Dakabringer. He could feel the shape of Franklin's mind, cold and crystalline, slicing through the warp like a blade of reason. Geometry given will. He hated it. He admired it. He set his own Gestalt against it, letting the green tide twist and coil in response, chaos against order, instinct against intellect. Let's see how your logic handles want. The Pride's guns roared again, and space screamed. Then something changed on the hololith, a new pattern, a spreading pulse. Over 1 million ships had entered the neighboring system. His ships. The true horde. Glorblasta's grin returned. Thought you'd cornered me, eh? That's the trouble with clever things, Dakabringer. You always think the fight's the point. His laughter shook the bridge. But you're too busy counting wins to notice the hunt. The pride of Gork and Mork and its escort were never meant to win. They were meant to hold the Dakabringer's gaze, to distract the eagle. Because Glorblasta understood something about humans, something primal and eternal. They were petty. They hated losing symbols. If you destroyed their armies, they would rebuild. But if you destroyed their hope, their icon, they would fall to despair. And if they thought their icon might still live, they would come crawling for blood. He always chases. That's his weakness. He can't abide an unfinished fight. He'll burn a galaxy to finish a sentence. Glorblasta whispered, tusked grin gleaming in the crimson light of battle. He reached out to the control spire, and his Gestalt surged in response. The pride of Gork and Mork began to turn, the surrounding fleets falling back into perfect formation. Plasma drives ignited. Portals began to bloom, shimmering green and hateful. To the humans, it would look like a retreat. To Glorblasta, it was bait. He gave one last glance toward the white and gold leviathan that tore through his armada like a vengeful god. Round 2, Dakabringer, he rumbled, voice heavy with promise. This time, I'll come for your nest. The pride of Gork and Mork vanished into the warp storm of its own making, and the void was left howling in silence. The bridge of the Sweet Liberty burned in gold and scarlet light, a cathedral of command and fury. Hollow constellations wrapped around Franklin Valorian like the hands of angels, his armor glimmered with refracted starlight. Below him, 1,000 ships answered his every word as if his thoughts had teeth. Carrier groups, swarm formation. Wings 4 through 9, pivot on axis theta, cut their line. His tone was calm, measured, and maddeningly sure. Each syllable reshaped the battle itself. On the tactical projection, Kruk icons bloomed and vanished in waves of green fire. Wherever Franklin pointed, something died. Destroyers turned on a vector no human mind should have been able to compute. Frigates slipped into quantum shadow, reappearing inside the gaps of the Kruk formations. Drones deployed in sheets of silver light, scything through green armor and flame. Franklin stood at the heart of it all, commanding not through panic, but through certainty. He was no longer fighting the present, he was dragging the future into place. The strings of causality shimmered in his sight, thin threads connecting explosions, trajectories, and probabilities. Every time he gave an order, those strings bent, tightened, and snapped in his favor. When a Kruk battery locked onto one of his cruisers, a squadron of bombers was already there, cutting through the void, their cyclonic payloads screaming like fallen comets. He barely moved his lips when he spoke, "Spearhead formation, concentrate fire on their starboard column." The reply came in light. A dozen Kruk battleships vanished, reduced to expanding halos of debris. Across the void, the pride of Gork and Mork loomed, an entire world wreathed in lightning and flame. It fired a planetary broadside, a lattice of energy that should have stripped sweet liberty of every atom. Franklin didn't even blink. Reflex array phase counterfire. Return to sender. A sphere of darkness swallowed the beam whole. Moments later, it erupted behind the Kruk planet, slicing through the fortress's shield lattice like a god's own judgment. The bridge crew cheered. Sovereign's holographic form flickered beside him, its serene, synthetic face watching the carnage unfold. Enemy fleet down to 60%, the AI intoned. Battle efficiency increasing exponentially. Franklin smiled faintly, eyes still on the storm. Of course it is. Victory was decided an hour ago. He meant it. In his mind's eye, Glorblasta's world was already exploding, its orbit breaking apart under the barrage. But even as the attack planet burned, Franklin could feel something. A wrongness, subtle but deliberate. The threads of causality quivered, pulled taut, then twisted. The Kruk were warping reality back. Their gestalt consciousness throbbed across the void like a wound in the warp. The dead began to scream again, ships that had already exploded flickering back into half-existence, probability itself rebelling against him. Sovereign's tone sharpened. Temporal anomalies detected. Enemy causality countermeasures nonlinear engagements across multiple vectors. Franklin's smile thinned. They're learning. Orders, Commander. He turned, eyes burning like molten bronze. We chase. He saw it, the pride of Gork and Mork, reeling but alive, turning away. The Kruk fleet fractured, retreating in perfect synchrony. It was the chance he'd waited for, the chance to end the creature he had once spared. He leaned forward, voice steady. Lock onto the pride. Prioritize all drives for immediate pursuit. Warning, Sovereign began. Their phase signature is unstable. Warp storm density is rising. Then we'll ride the storm. For the first time in hours, Franklin's smirk returned. He runs because he knows. This time, there will be no mercy. Across the fleet, alarms flared. Drive cores roared to life. Reality folded in on itself as the sweet liberty and her 1,000 ships flared white. Execute jump. The stars screamed and Battlefleet Liberty vanished into the storm. Trillions dead. Never again. The void was burning. When Battlefleet Liberty burst from faster than light, they expected pursuit. What they found was apocalypse. A million signatures ignited across every spectrum: plasma storms, warp fissures, the luminous wakes of engines large enough to swallow continents. Kruk ships, more numerous than stars in sight, filled the void in concentric waves. Franklin had not pursued Glorblasta, he had charged straight into his jaws. Contact. Mass signatures 10 to the 6th magnitude. Encirclement pattern forming. Estimated hostile strength, overwhelming. Franklin stood unmoving at the observation dais, eyes narrowed at the impossible constellation of enemies. The cold clarity in his tone was worse than shouting. They were waiting. They read our jump. Sovereign's response carried a weight of grim discovery. Confirmed. Analysis of the ambush pattern indicates recognition of inertialess drive emissions. The Kruk gestalt saturates the local continuum. Every shift in zero momentum registers like thunder in vacuum. They can hear us move. Franklin's jaw tightened. They turned the laws of motion into a trap. The hololithic projection flared Glorblasta's face, half-wreathed in the glow of his world fortress, the pride of Gork and Mork. The Kruk's grin was as wide as continents. Checkmate, Dakabringer, Glorblasta rumbled, the sound like tectonic plates grinding. 1,000 against 1,000,000. Let's see what your pretty toys can do. The stars erupted. Millions of Kruk weapons discharged simultaneously: quantum hammers, stellar cannons, and God knows what else. The assault didn't sound, it arrived. Battlefleet Liberty was flayed in a single instant. Cruisers vanished, torn apart before their crews could scream. The sweet Liberty endured. Her shields flared, her hull screaming like a living beast as gravitational flux rippled across her black stone spine. Yet she did not fall. Franklin's voice cut through the inferno. Order the fleet to fall under the Liberty's shadow. Now! Hide behind the wings of the Archangel. Admiral Koshka obeyed instantly, her commands sharp as gunfire. All ships, form up beneath the flagship's shield harmonics. Bring every capacitor online. Across the void, the remaining ships tightened formation huddled like children beneath the glow of a god. Quantum shields overlapped. Klein portals opened in sequence, redirecting energy blasts into nothingness. But the Kriegsmarine pressed harder. Hull alarms blared. Quantum shields flickered. Klein portals distorted, bending space into molten auroras. Shields at 91%, Sovereign reported, his tone calm despite the maelstrom. 89. 83. Primarch, the stress is reaching threshold. Franklin's hand hovered above the command dais, his eyes fixed on the storm. His voice dropped into a calm that terrified everyone listening. Then we end it. Fire the annihilators. Sweet Liberty's dorsal lines lit up in sequence, auric veins blazing across her 10,000-kilometer frame. Graviton annihilators, full cycle, Sovereign confirmed. Then the stars died. Space twisted around the flagship as the annihilators released their fury, artificial singularities blooming like black flowers across the void. The gravitational waves rippled outward, devouring light and mass alike. Krieg ships screamed through the warp link, some crushed into atoms, others dragged helplessly into the hungry dark. 1,000 suns were born and extinguished in seconds. For a heartbeat, Battlefleet Liberty saw victory. Then Glorblast's laughter filled every channel, a thunder rolling through their souls. You think gravity can stop me, Daka Bringer? The pride of Gork and Mork flared crimson. Psychic lightning tore across the stars. Glorblasta howled, and every black hole inside imploded, collapsing under a single titanic burst of Gestalt will. The void went eerily still. Sovereign's voice crackled across the bridge. Annihilators neutralized. Gestalt psychic interference collapsed the gravity wells. However, it has opened their flank. Franklin's eyes gleamed. Then that's all we need. He strode to the command dais, hand hovering over the activation runes of Sweet Liberty's heart. Event Horizon Array Prepare Sequence. Lowest power. Subsector-wide reset. Admiral, the Event Horizon Array will require coupling to Sagittarius A** for temporal constant stabilization. I must remind you, every activation weakens the gravitational lattice of the Milky Way. The core will destabilize further. Franklin smiled faintly. Then we'll just have to remind the galaxy who writes its laws. The array fired. The stars went silent. No light. No sound. Just a spreading bloom of uncolorous fear of nothingness that erased the meaning of existence within its radius. The Krieg fleet, their planetary fortresses, their millions of guns gone. Not destroyed, but unmade. Sovereign's processors screamed with warnings. Causal baseline destabilizing. Galactic core echo detected Sagittarius A** spin variation increasing by 0.02%. Across the void, Glorblasta's laughter echoed through the psychic plane. Ha! You'll drown us both, Daka Bringer. You think you won, but the galaxy bleeds for it. And with a final roar of psychic defiance, the pride of Gork and Mork vanished into the warp, its captain escaping through raw will alone. In the silence that followed, Franklin stood alone on the command deck. The entire Krieg armada was gone, millions of ships erased in an instant. But the galaxy itself groaned, ever so faintly, in protest. Sovereign's voice was almost a whisper now. Causal echoes spreading from the galactic center. The core remembers, Franklin. It does not forget being rewritten. He gazed into the empty void where an entire army had once stood, his reflection shimmering in the holographic stars. Then it'll just have to forgive me, he said softly. Because this war isn't over. The war room of Sweet Liberty was cast in spectral hues from the holographic projection of the battlefield, a slowly rotating galaxy, its sectors bleeding crimson where the Kriegs had struck. The lights dimmed to a somber glow as Sovereign's voice, calm and metallic, finished its report. Cross-analysis complete. The probability of further ambushes using inertialess transit, 98.4%. The Krieg Gestalt perceives our drives not as light but as ripples bright as novas to their collective senses. The Continental High Command stood in grim silence around the hololithic table. Admiral Elena Koshka's gloved fist clenched at her side. Then we're blind and crippled, the warp storms make translation impossible, and now our own engines betray us. Every jump could lead straight into another trap. Yamato Nakajima, ever composed despite the exhaustion in his voice, added. Our stealth squadrons confirm it. The crooks react before we even breach into real space. They see the drives before we arrive. The room vibrated faintly as distant thunder rolled through the ship, repairs still underway, the echo of 1,000 mechanical servitors laboring in the halls. Franklin stood at the far end of the table, coat unbuttoned, light from the hollow map painting his features in stark blue and gold. His eyes, as sharp as ever, were fixed not on the map, but on the swirling darkness where Nova Liberta's should have been. For a long moment, no one spoke. Even Sovereign's voice fell silent. Then Franklin exhaled. A tired sound. A human sound. So. The warp is useless. The drives are compromised. That leaves us with roads we were never meant to walk. Deep within the tomb world of Thanatos, in the sanctum of the celestial orrery, the universe's holographic model glows like a billion stars suspended in black glass. Each planet hums in harmony with the real galaxy beyond. The conclave of celestial guardians is gathered, Hawk Maffei upon his obsidian dais, Ashanti and Zwakar maintaining the field lattices, Zotha the observer floating among data streams. The orrery trembled. For a moment, a fraction of a nanosecond, the galaxy skipped. Millions of stars flickered, systems blinked out, and the entire orrery moaned like a choir of dying suns. The harmonic hum of reality itself went off-key. Hawk Maffei the Faerin of Oriskar rose from his throne, his necrodermis glimmering like mercury in panic. Zwakar. Report. Why do the heavens stutter? The chief technomancer's fingers flared with cascading hieroglyphs, each rune collapsing into static. It is not warp interference. It is not chronal decay. The data is absent. Not lost, absent. The stars have ceased to have ever been. The words carried the weight of blasphemy. Necron logic could not articulate absence, absence was for mortals and gods. Ashanti, her body like a lattice of cold light, extended her plasmantic tendrils into the core of the orrery. The glow of her essence dimmed as she read the data. The orrery remembers being complete. The records declare no flaw. Yet the coordinates of segmentum Auriga no longer exist within the fundamental constants of the galaxy. Subsector Auriga. Murmured Zotha, the observer, his voice like the echo of grinding stars. That is, 10,000 light-years from the galactic core. Ashanti turned her hollow eyes toward him. No. It was 10,000 light-years. It is not anything now. A silence settled, the kind of silence that only machine gods could create. The orrery pulsed again, recalibrating. Then a ripple spread through the holographic starscape like ink bleeding through water. The map reasserted itself, reconstructing ghost data from adjacent gravity wells, trying to make sense of a void that refused to be quantified. Zwakar spoke, his tone darkly reverent. The orrery seeks to heal itself. But the wound is conceptual. Someone has edited the curvature of space-time. Hawk Maffei's optics burned emerald fire. That is a claim for primitives and warp-mongers. None but we possess that precision. Ashanti countered, her voice trembling with raw plasma discharge. Faerin, this is not imprecision. This is a reversal. It is computation beyond our mathematics. Whoever did this used the gravity well of Sagittarius A as their calibration constant. At that, Hawk Maffei froze. Every cryptech in the chamber halted. The mention of the central black hole, the aura's sacred reference point, was sacrilege. Zotha drifted closer to the holographic projection. The empty region glowed faintly, like a scar where stars once were. Something has rewritten the universe by persuading the galaxy's heart to forget. Zwakar, his logic spiraling toward awe, whispered. There are traces, he growled. Minute gravitational echoes. Quantum tethers anchored to Sagittarius A. Whoever performed this, weaponized the galactic core. That is not Necron science, it is equivalent. A/N, Sweet Liberty.
Additionally, if you would like to request novels and access my Google Drive where I have 200+ audiobooks, then you can join my Patreon. Link is also provided in the description.